Okay, so I'll say just a little bit about non-duality. Um, non-duality can be summed up in all sorts of ways. I'm just going to say it's the seeing through the self. It's the seeing that there is no separate self. So there seems to be, we could say, the normal way or the ordinary way of seeing is that there seems to be, let's say, two things or two entities. So that's duality. And one of these things, one of these entities, is my sense of me as a person as separate. And the other thing is, if you like, everything else. In other words, the world that I move through. So that's the kind of normal experience, we could say, the normal experience of duality. I am separate from the world that I live in, and I move through that world, and I have to negotiate with that world. I have to negotiate, of course, with objects and events, but most of all, I have to negotiate with those sometimes difficult other entities known as other people. Um, this can cause all sorts of problems as well as all sorts of delights. And we may put a great deal of effort into attempting to solve the problems of duality in many, many different ways. So the suggestion here today is that there is another and a radical way of seeing, I'll put it, another a radical way of seeing, and that is that that sense of separation, that I am separate from the world through which I move, can simply collapse. And when it collapses, then it can simply be recognized that there is no separation because there's no separate person to be experiencing separation. And then what there is simply everything that's happening, or whatever is happening. Then all there is it's sometimes quite often summed up as nothing and everything. And that is non-duality, the disappearance of the sense that the person is a separate entity, and the recognition that that was never the case, and there is and has always been simply what is happening. And that can have huge implications, some of which we may discuss this afternoon or not, we'll see. But I'm going to leave this kind of general introduction at that for now, and we'll see what comes up during this session. Do you want to add
Yeah,
to that?
well, I'll just say, yeah, so um, life can seem, when you're identified, can seem very dull in a sense, and you're always looking for some sort of distraction, some kind of thrill, or something to make it okay. And it's always, you always feel like it's to do with the mind somehow. And then somehow it's realized that that all that energy that creates that sense of self is just a mind-based thing. And suddenly when the identification falls away from the mind, um, the energy that's absolutely wrapped up in that is absolutely freed. So everything becomes alive again. Like perhaps you might remember that as a child, where is everything you look at becomes full of life, energized, revitalized, and entirely absorbing. So all the problems, everything that's been a struggle in life, suddenly your absorption into what's happening is just a total relief, and it brings a total peace. Um, there's often a second event, you know, the first one, just seeing the emptiness of everything, that there's no one here, there's nothing, and that can happen without the seeing of love. So that can bring about a kind of relaxation, but it can be quite stagnant as well, until love is seen, which is it's an impersonal love, which is a joy, which is a total celebration of life in a way. It absolutely blows you away. It is nothing you can imagine, nothing compares to it, nothing you've ever experienced, nothing comes close to it at all. It is the absolute, it is seen everywhere. Everywhere reflects that beauty, that love, and that intimacy with all life. And there is an in-loveness with everything that exists. And that includes, I don't know, the glass of water, the sky, the trees, and so it is seen when the self itself is seen through this. So there's no one here, there's no one there, there's no other. So there's just this seamless joy, this and everything is somehow that restores, you see the sacred in everything as well. So that might have been sought, you might have been in religion or something, or looking for the sacred, or the, trying to find what is holy, what is perfect, and suddenly that is actually seen. It's a quality that is intrinsic to life that you weren't seeing. So the sacred dimension is beauty, and I think that's what so many artists have tried to capture as well. It's just stunning. It's there. You don't need art, you don't need anything, you just see it. And it's the stillness of that, the stillness, because the mind falls away, it loses its power. Even if the mind doesn't go entirely, it doesn't have that same kind of, it normally creates a veil, and suddenly there's just this beauty and stillness, which seems to be a quality in itself that lends beauty to everything. So initially, after such an awakening, nothing seems to be needed at all to bring fulfillment. So there's no longer seeking for a story, seeking for resolution of a conflict, or any kind of need of anything. And all you want to do basically is to sit, which is the most perfect thing in the world, to sit and particularly in nature, that's where I've always felt it most strongly, and just to look, and yeah, so everything is restored, and that can go on for some time, in an intensity. It becomes more normal over time. It becomes quite, it becomes very ordinary, but it's, yeah, so that is the end of seeking. And yeah, so that's, yeah, nothing and everything. That's it. So yeah.
Thank you. I have a question from William. William, go ahead and mute yourself.
Thanks, Emerson. Hi, Richard and Dawn.
Hi.
I love the introduction. It was really good. Because I had a question, but I think maybe part of what Dawn said might answer. The question I have is, when the sense of self falls away, is that the end of all expectations for things to go well or for things to go a certain way?
It's not so much the end of that. Like, it doesn't matter how things go, like, in the same way. So you might want them to go a certain way, but it's okay how they go. So you're kind of, there's no kind of disappointment, and you don't expect things to be other than how they go, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's more like that, I think, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I could throw in the word, it's a kind of natural acceptance. And I think we have to be a bit wary of that word, even though I'm using it, because particularly those of us who've perhaps spent time on spiritual paths, and so there's an awful lot that's made of acceptance, and it turns into a task. Yet another thing I have to do on my spiritual path is become more accepting. And here I am, if I grit my teeth and clench my fist hard enough, then perhaps I really will become enormously accepting. So it's nothing to do with that. It's just like there's a kind of natural acceptance of what is, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's neutral, because it's seen that somehow, I, the person, am not in that. And so there's a kind of, a sort of letting go. That was supposed to be the sound of a lovely, relaxing sigh there, a kind of, letting go.
But in saying that, it's also, in some ways, things do flow more easy. So it's, you don't struggle so much to kind of accomplish things in a way, so there's not the same, because you're not stuck in the kind of ego worry about things as well. So there is a natural flow that seems to arise as well. So
yeah, I think the expectations that I always project are about what I need to become fulfilled. And obviously you said that falls away with the self. But then, and obviously, an immense amount of control. Well, the idea I have control, I need to do these things in order to guarantee a certain result in the future. But what you've both said answers it perfectly.
Yeah, just be yourself. Yeah, that's all you need to be. You know, it just seems easier to do that. You know, just and if something doesn't work out, then it seems much easier to so what, kind of more of a so what about that as well. You know, you're not so invested in it. You know.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well, in regards to putting an expectation that I need to have fulfilled, is so that I avoid certain emotions if things don't go the way that I think I need them to go. And so would you be able to say anything about it when the sense of self falls away, how emotions kind of, they're not pushed away, would you say?
Yeah, well, they're yeah, well, they don't seem, there's no avoiding of that, but you know, and everybody's different, because in my case there's an awful lot of emotional neutrality anyway, so there's nothing in a sense to avoid, or like when suffering arises, it doesn't stay, so it can arise, but it just doesn't, because it seems like it's okay to, like everything seems like appropriate to feel, so it's not like there's no reason to push it away, because it's very natural, so you're just with, you know, you're with that emotion because it's natural to what's happened, and so something like that, I think.
Yeah, I think I guess the sense of being a person is like, these emotions I shouldn't be feeling. In regards to what you were saying about there's nothing that's inappropriate to feel or unnatural to feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and particularly the negative emotions, and the negative emotions are really good as well, because they're good at getting your boundaries, and they give you information. All that stuff is actually good, and so yeah, there's often a pushing away of those, and actually they're very useful. So yeah.
Going back to what you're saying about the sense of control as well, it's the seeing that the one who seems to have control doesn't exist. So what happens, happens. So whether it's perceived as good, bad, negative, or whatever, it's likely to be perceived as flowing and not having anything to do with me, not in the sense that there is a me who's detached from it, but purely in the sense that the me that I once believed that I was is now seen through.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, like, there's been glimpses of this, and obviously I can't remember exactly what that was like, but it's impossible for me to imagine life without the need for control. I guess that's just something that the sense of self will either fall or it won't, and until it does, I suppose there's always going to be that need of control, isn't there, with the feeling that I'm separate, and that there's things that I need to control.
But of course, that sense of need of control is always an illusion, whether it's seen through or not. It is always an illusion, you know, that there is some, I mean, it's one of the most fundamental things about separation, about being a separate person, if you like, that I feel I have this precious thing called free will, through which I can exercise control over myself, to some extent control over events and maybe even other people. So it's very, very, very fundamental to our sense of self that I am in control, with both the gifts and the dangers and the threats that bring. So it's pretty fundamental. When that's seen through, it's part of the shock. It is very much part of the shock. Oh my God, there never was ever anyone here who actually controlled anything, there never was anyone here who ever made a choice. What's more, there never was anyone here who ever had a thought or had a feeling. That was all simply happening.
Lovely. Thank you for the answers. That was great.
just going to move something here on the screen that we're looking at.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question come up. It's lucky I had something in front of the chat line. So a question has come up here from Ray Martin. I'm really confused about free will. Can both of you elaborate on that? Do you want to tackle that first?
Free will, that's a biggie. Well,
It's quite a biggie, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's seen that there's no one to do anything, but at the same time, that doesn't stop, you from being able to do things it doesn't actually change the experience much, in the sense that, if you need to change things, you use your intelligence and, do what is necessary. But it's just, yeah, it's seen much more that things happen spontaneously as well. So there isn't that energetic, like you say, that sense of control tends to dissolve as well. So, yeah, free will seems to me, I don't know, a big issue for people, but it doesn't change the experience and the intimacy with life and your relationship to life, in a sense, is just as, if not more profound, because you enter into relationships much more deeply than you did previously, in my experience. Yeah, it's just, yeah, there's more like a merging with others when you're engaged in relationship, or you're engaged in friendship and stuff. There's much more of a merging and stuff. So there's nothing about this that's negative or detracts from the experience of the character. It's much more intimate. It's much more lovely, because it can sound really awful, the free will thing, I think, from if you're, coming from a sense of self, but actually it's really beautiful.
Because I think it's one of the things that the mind most resists about this. And in fact, in a way, if we want to start an argument, perhaps a very loud argument about non-duality, or even simply about life itself, then to deny free will, to say that free will is an illusion, is a very good way of starting an argument, because it tends to really, people tend to sense that as really kind of like an attack on one of the things which is felt to be most precious about being a person, and about life itself, that I have this thing through which I can exercise some kind of control over that other thing that I talked about right at the beginning, that world, that separate world through which I move. So in a way, when that sense of self collapses and it's seen that there isn't a separation, there isn't a separate me that exists in a separate world, in a way the issue of free will kind of becomes almost irrelevant. But don't expect the mind to accept that. The mind very often clings to the idea of free will, very, 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 very desperately. And in a way, by the way, it's not, there's no one here actually saying, it's not that there's anyone here saying there's no free will. It's rather that what's being said here is there is no person. So the idea of free will doesn't even really arise. The possibility of free will doesn't even arise, because there is no one who could exercise it. So the whole thing of free will, it just really collapses. And if you've been taking an interest in this from a kind of mind level, it's obvious there's an awful lot of debate out there. There are a lot of books about free will now. There's an awful lot of debate on YouTube about it, and some of it gets very, very, very heated indeed. If you want to see a heated debate on free will, watch Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett lock horns about it, because they take absolutely opposing sides. And I find that debate quite interesting, actually. I find, the arguments quite interesting, but in a way, they're also irrelevant, because if this is directly seen, if non-duality is directly seen, sense of self is seen through, then free will just becomes a I'm just going to say, a non-issue. It becomes irrelevant because it's seen, as I say, not so much that there is no free will, but that there is no one who could possibly own free will or operate it, if you like. Yeah. Anything more on that, or
no,
should we look at Ray's next? So, so Ray Martin has put up here now: are we meat robots then, and are we in a simulation? If there is no free will, and if it's an illusion? Do you wanna?
I don't know. Maybe we are. Who knows? Like, I don't know what we're in. But no, I mean, because like I say, it doesn't destroy anything. That it, you know, because it, you know, what we take for life is so small. Like that sort of, we're so self-absorbed, and then suddenly that self-absorption ends. It's like it is a total freedom. So, you know, like the question of free will, I mean, it's not something you even think about. Like it's, you know, it still matters to the character stuff that happens. I mean, it's still, there's an intimacy with this, there's an intimacy, you know, with the rest of life. So there's really nothing. It is not a loss. Like it you know, it's only a loss of that identification. It's an absolute gain. It's a gain of the world. It's a gain of life. You know, you become one with life. It's beautiful in that respect. And the joy is, you know, it's nothing that any human relationship can bring you. You know, it's that love. It depends on nothing. You know, so yeah.
And the sense of choice can still arise. The sense of decision making can still arise. You know, in the restaurant, will it be the fish? Will it be the meat? The fish, the meat, the fish, the meat.
Yeah.
I'll have the meat. That seems to be like a choice. It seems to be like a decision. It's just that there's no one actually making that. As to whether we are meat robots, I've used quite a lot of phrases and similes to try to describe, you know, what this really is and what that really is, and other speakers and writers have some phrases that have been used, you know, the divine puppet, psychophysical organism. That's not a very romantic phrase, but nevertheless, meat robot I've never come across before, and I have to say it doesn't particularly appeal to me, but yeah, fine, if it sounds right for you, then go with it. Are we in a simulation? I have absolutely no idea, and what difference does it make? The point is, in a way, you know, we are in a simulation. We're not in a simulation. We are subject to the laws of God. We are not subject to the laws of God. We are on the Buddha's path to enlightenment. We've come off the Buddha's path to enlightenment. The point is, these are all stories. You know, these are all constructs that the mind makes to try to make sense of its dilemma, and the basic dilemma is separation. So because we seem to live in separation, and because that's uncomfortable and difficult, we make up all sorts of stories about the fact that this maybe is about something and it's going somewhere, and I'm playing maybe some quite important part in it going somewhere. So this is somehow a story which is developing towards a goal, whether that goal is ultimate enlightenment or resting at last in the arms of God, or realizing I'm in the matrix and breaking out of it. I mean, who cares? I mean, they're all stories. So yes, maybe we're in a simulation, maybe we're not, maybe we're fulfilling the will of God, maybe we're not, and maybe we're on the Buddha's Eightfold Noble Path, and maybe we're not. Ultimately, none of that can be known. All of that is just an entertainment for the mind. Oh, there's another question here. Should we move on? We ready?
All right, okay, cool.
Oh, they're coming in thick and fast on the chat. Some speakers, this is from some sort of code name. Some speakers say that there is no such thing as mind, Others talk about using the mind as a tool for seeing that one is not in control of his life. Can this help in a way to give up? Thank you. So I think the heart of that is, can using the mind as a tool for seeing that no one is in control help in any way?
Well, the mind is just the thought stream. There is not, which is seen to be, when you wake up as well, like when awakening happens, the mind seems to lose its energy. I mean, it seems to be, it's almost like a death to that. It seems very flat, and quite other. You mean it, so it just, it loses all its kind of power in a way. So it's a strange one. When it happened to me, I just thought everybody must have realized that. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the mind and you examine the mind, you can see that it's happening spontaneously. I think you can see that. It doesn't stop identification, but you can certainly, through meditation and stuff, and really look at the mind and see how it operates, see how it functions, see the kind of movements it makes. And I think it gives you some sort of insight into what's going on. But that actually, the mysterious thing is how that identification falls away, of course, because that's the thing that you can't, no one can make that happen. But yeah, I mean, it's no harm to, it's very useful to look at that and to learn more about how it functions, because they're all quite similar in a sense. Once you kind of get a sense of how your own mind operates, you get an idea of what mind is, and it's actually really quite powerless. You don't need it. There's knowing anyway without mind. Without mind, everything is known. When the mind falls away, when you're in absolute stillness, mental inner, stillness, there's no need of any thought stream whatsoever to navigate life. There really isn't. In that, there is more room for insights and for a new thought, because you're not going through the endless churning of rumination and the rest of it. And actually thought tends to be, because normally thought has a negative bias as well. And I think after awakening, it can often have a kind of positive bias or a neutral bias, but it's, yeah. So I think
yeah, I mean, it can certainly seem, for the person that the mind may be a wonderful, wonderful tool for exploring all sorts of things, including this, wonderful thing, whatever we might think of it as, a spiritual path or awakening or non-duality or whatever. But, of course that collapses when it's seen that actually, the mind as an entity, doesn't exist. It is, as you've been saying, it is, it's a thought stream, and it's a thought stream which is emerging, if you like, out of nothing and falling back into nothing. So it doesn't really have anything to do essentially with what I, in separation, believe myself to be. So I might have all sorts of very, very powerful beliefs that I have this precious thing called a mind, which I can do all sorts of wonderful things with, including searching for liberation. But that's all again blown apart. I mean, just a split second of disappearance of the person can blow that apart completely. And kind of paradoxically, the energy which seems to create the mind can then operate far more freely, and it can become more pleasurable, more exciting, less neurotic. It can do, yeah.
Yeah.
Another one here, another question from Angela Lingham. Oh dear. What is the difference between this communication and what is discussed in Buddhism called anatta, or no self?
It's a good one for you, Buddhism.
I'll have a go at that, shall I? Yes, I once read a book on Buddhism. Well, I'm going to say something very simple to start with, and then maybe make it a little bit more complicated. I would say the simplest thing to say is this is identical. There's no difference. So there you go. Maybe it's the reason why it's, I mean, some people may disagree with this, but I'd say maybe it's the reason why it is much easier to see parallels between this communication of non-duality and Buddhism, between, say, this communication of non-duality and fundamentalist Christianity. Let's say it's much more difficult to find connections there. But I would say that what in Buddhism is called anatta, or no self, I speak by no means as an expert on Buddhism, but nevertheless, they're absolutely identical. It's the same thing. However, there is a but coming. There is a but coming. For the last 2,500 apparent years, Buddhists have been arguing, and sometimes pretty ferociously, about what no self actually means. So on a mind level, you know, when it comes to concepts and things like this, this can just generate as much disputation, as much argument, as much hot air as in Christianity, the nature of the Trinity. I'm not going to go into the nature of the Trinity. I'm sure we'll all be very relieved to hear that. But learned divines have been arguing about the nature of the Trinity for nearly 2,000 years. In some cases, they've been burning each other to death over the disagreements. And Buddhists have been arguing about the true nature of no self for 2,500 years, and occasionally have come to blows over it as well. So that's what happens when the mind gets involved. So as far as this is concerned, you know, no self is something that's seen or it's not seen. You know, as an idea, no self really has no value, except that it can generate a lot of interesting evenings, perhaps. You know, if we're fed up with watching EastEnders, then we could have a lovely discussion about no self. But from the level of the mind, it won't get us anywhere. But when it's seen, it's just seen. It's the absolute heart and basis of what we're talking about. You know, either self seems to be there or it's gone.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's about right.
About right. You
Yeah.
want to add anything else on that one?
Not really. No.
Should we go on?
Maybe.
Oh, Kevin. So this is the next one. I'm not bothering to censor these questions by reading them in advance. This might turn out to be a mistake, but so far, anyway. So the next one. Does a balanced spine have a special place or function in spirituality or on the way to enlightenment? I think that's kind of one for you.
I don't know what a balanced spine is.
Well, no, but it's
like
making me think a bit.
What?
Well, I don't know. We could just say pass if we want to.
Yeah, I have no idea what a balanced spine is. Something to do with what I don't know, some sort of kundalini or chakra, I don't know.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah, balanced energy, balance. Yeah, okay. So you're supposed to, awakening is supposed to be easier if you have already kind of meditated or done some spiritual practice, because, you know, there's more balance in the system. Yeah. I don't know if it's that predictable anyway. Like after awakening, it's supposed to be, if you've got trauma in the system and there's awakening, sometimes in the literature it says that things can come up, it can be really problematic. I don't know that that's always the case, certainly not from what I've come across and what I've read also. So in my own case, there was certainly a lot of chaos. I was falling apart. There was a lot of depression. There was a lot of, you know, everything was being stripped, and it went into a state of just absolute peace. Except I couldn't sleep for months. Maybe that was hard to navigate. But yeah, some people can have energetic stuff can come up, and maybe they'll have problems. Actually, I had that as well, like problems thinking, because I found it very hard to understand language actually for a while, because my mind was totally empty, but also when people spoke, I found it quite difficult sometimes to understand what they were saying. And so yeah, I find it quite difficult to focus on things and to concentrate for a long time. Actually, afterwards, reading was almost impossible, but just sitting in nature was absolutely amazing. I didn't need to do any of that. So yeah, so maybe it can. I mean, maybe if there is more psychological adjustment or more peace there beforehand, that'd be an easier course for you, because trauma can survive this. And sometimes maybe after awakening there can be this period of absolute peace, and then stuff maybe will start to bubble up again. So the things that you were able to kind of escape, you might have to deal with further down the line. But I've also experienced that too. So it's unpredictable, actually. But yeah, if you're inclined towards meditation or whatever, I mean that's great anyway. It's great for the mind. It's absolutely and so yeah, great for health. So yeah.
Yeah, all I'll add to that is because the question says, does the spine have a special function in spirituality? All I'll add is that, as far as I'm concerned, this communication here about non-duality, it's got nothing in particular to do with spirituality. I mean, it includes spirituality because it includes everything, but it has as much or as little to do with spirituality as it has to do with drinking a cup of tea. So there is nothing here particularly that says, spirituality. I mean, spirituality is included because everything is included, but this is not what I would call a spiritual communication, or certainly not a spiritual message. Yeah. By the way, I mean, I'm just reading these chat questions because that's what's coming in. I mean, I assume that, if anybody wants to come in live on this and sort of ask a question on screen, then there's a method for doing that via Emerson, who's working the technological magic of this evening.
You can raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and then I'll call you. Eligio.
Hey, Emerson. Hello,
hey,
Emerson.
How's it going?
I got a question about what Mr. Sylvester just said. He said it's not about spirituality. Is that correct?
Sorry, I don't know if it's really breaking up. I had a lot of difficulty listening to hearing that.
Okay, sorry. You just said that this is not about spirituality. Is that right? This is not about spirituality.
Not particularly. It includes spirituality because it includes everything. So it's about spirituality. It's about drinking a cup of coffee. It's no more about spirituality than about drinking a cup of coffee.
Okay. This is not about letting go of the addiction to seeking.
Is what about letting go of the addiction to seeking?
What you're talking about. Like
yeah, it would be if there was anyone who could let go of the addiction to seeking. I mean, the addiction to seeking is there or it isn't. I mean, I would only use the word addiction very loosely. I mean, whatever this is, this Richard was quite passionately involved in seeking for quite a long time, and then that kind of stopped. But there was nothing here that let go of that addiction or that passionate seeking. It had an energy, apparently, apparently it had an energy in the life of this apparent person, and then it didn't anymore. You want to?
Yeah. So would you say something happened or nothing happened?
I'd say nothing happened. Yeah,
so
but I'm not trying to be clever here when I say I'd say nothing happened. I mean, I've said this before. It's like, you have to hit. You don't have to, but you could hear that in two different ways. Nothing happened, but also nothing happened, as in nothing was seen.
Because it was already.
Yeah, it was already. Right. But whatever this is, maybe it's a meat robot. I don't know. But whatever this is, wasn't seeing that. Yeah, nothing was already, but this was not seeing that.
Okay.
Well, maybe just to say that, I mean, saying nothing happened. I mean, the transformation is huge. I mean, for me, the first event is nothing. Like it's a noticing, and it wasn't particularly startling to me, except that, that I thought something bad had happened. But the seeing of love is so transformational. It is an event, and it does change everything. And so to say nothing happened, like it's a massive thing. Nothing comes close to that, and you can't even imagine it. You really can't. So to say nothing happened, it can make it seem like there's no change. There's massive change. And
yeah. Okay, I get it logically.
That's kind of why, I say, you don't have to, but you could hear that phrase in both ways. Nothing happened, but also nothing happened, and that is cosmic.
Yeah.
Seeing nothing happening is cosmic. See, seeing that is seeing everything arising out of nothing.
Yeah. So I think I'm ready to be a speaker because I get it logically, and I know I may not get it energetically, but I get it logically. Therefore, I'm already there because that's a logic. You see what I mean?
No.
I know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What do you mean? You just you understand it? I mean, it's just a
conceptually. In my head, I understand it.
I mean, is there more than that? Does it resonate with you? Is there a sense of at-homeness as well with that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there is. When you guys talk, oh yeah, it's peaceful.
All right. Okay. So something has been seen then. So it's not just logic then.
Okay.
Well, is there before? Can you describe a before and after then?
Yes, but but then that's the story, right?
Yeah, fair enough. It's a story, but it's still valid in talking about this. Like
sure.
So okay. So something's been seen. So
yeah. So
seeking's ended with you then, has it?
It feels a little different today, but it could be just the mood I'm in.
What way today? Can you say more?
Yeah. Like okay, like I couldn't figure out the concept of nothing is happening. Nothing happens. Nothing is happening now, and the reason is because thinking that something is happening is an observer noticing something happen. So that's why there's nothing happening, because there's no one here.
Right.
Correct? Or that's what you asked me a question.
I'm getting caught up in your kind of mind stuff. Like okay. Okay, so I don't know.
But I do notice something happening at the same time. Like it's real.
Okay, yeah, the observer thing. I mean, often that's an idea as well. I mean,
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I got to drop that idea, or not be that observer.
Or maybe
I understand that.
You might just come to not worry about that. That there's, I think after this happens, sometimes there's an awful lot of this shouldn't be there, or like trying to verify that. Is that what's happening for you? Do you find it difficult to sort of own it, or?
Yeah, I find it difficult to own it because sometimes I don't like the speakers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a natural thing. You'll watch these speakers and you'll think, oh God, they emphasize a certain thing, and well, it's not like that, or I think that's a phase. You'll just go through that and you'll go up and down with it, and then you won't give it a rat's, like
You're right.
Yeah,
and I'm feeling that falling away too. Like, okay, that's his tick or whatever. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I take what I want and leave the rest, basically.
Right. That sounds good.
Okay. I think I got it, or not got it, but thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
Yes. There's another hand up there I can see.
Oh, really?
Go ahead, Howard.
Hey, you guys.
Hi,
Hi.
Honored to speak with you, Richard, and both of you, actually. I was wondering, this might be a basic question for you, Richard, but does time and space exist?
does time and space exist? Yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. One of the shocks, I think, of what I call an event, an awakening event or whatever, is the recognition that, and I'll put it in an absolute way for now, that there is no time or space. There is only this. We could call it now if we like. That's a little bit confusing, but there is only this, in which everything is apparently arising. So everything is apparently arising kind of implies space, and yet somehow it's seen that, there is no space, because when this collapses, then I'm going to use slightly misleading words here. Awareness, perception, whatever you want to call it, seeing is everywhere. And because it's everywhere, there isn't any everywhere. If this is equal, if we deal in here and there, if this is equally here and there, then here and there collapse, they disappear. So there's no space. And if everything is a word that's just popped into my head, it's a bit pompous, but I'd use it. If everything is co-eternal, then there's no past or future. There is simply this, so there's no time. Right? And what I'm saying is that this can clearly be seen. It's probably equally clear from what I'm stammering my way through here now. It can clearly be seen, but equally clearly it cannot really be described. It certainly can't be put into ideas or words. But so in a way, we kind of either have to take that as read or not, throw it out or let it in. It doesn't really matter. But the other thing that I would say is that as long as physical death has not occurred, the character, I'm going back to the meat robot now, Richard, the character, as long as that continues to exist, clearly exists in time. Or I could say clearly, it'd be much more accurate to say clearly exists in the appearance of time. So sitting here, it's completely obvious that there is just this. There is just this. I mean, one of the contentions I make is that this can not just be seen, but also in a way, it can also be fairly obvious to the mind. Not that that matters.
Yes, sir.
But it is quite obvious that there is just this. There's no past, there's no future, there is no time. And also, this is a character who lives in time. There's a memory here of having gone down to the shops this morning to buy some food for this evening. There's an expectation that supper will be cooked tonight. So the character absolutely lives in time.
I agree.
If there's ever, I'll just finish this, if there is ever a case, and there probably are, if there's ever a case of characters, who don't live in time at all, they won't be functioning in anything like a practical or normal way. Any character who does not live in time will probably be in full-time care.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I agree. Yes, in principle, sure. Yes, you do and you don't. But what do you think that means for a brain, a physical brain that exists in time and space? Do you think you think?
I've no idea what it means for a physical brain.
If time and space is not actual, and there's not a physical brain that actually is producing consciousness, then do you think?
Oh, that was do I think?
Do you think?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Absolutely not. How can I or you think? There is no I and there is no you, but thinking nevertheless happens. In other words, thinking, in other words, the appearance. I'll keep this very simple in terms of thinking. I'll ignore other forms of perception other than, what we normally think of as thought. So there is a stream there's a thought stream, if you like, Sometimes it may be a very energized thought stream. Sometimes it might be quite a low energy of thought stream. Sometimes it may not be there at all. Clearly, it's not there at all in dreamless sleep. So there is, if you like, a process. I mean, we talk about the mind. We could say, well, the mind is also simply a process. You know, there's no thing, the mind, but there is a process of thinking and other perceptions, you know, feeling, sensing, and so forth.
Could
flow. If you like, there's only flow. You know, there's no objects. There is only flow. Or another way of putting this is there's no objects. There's only process.
Ooh, that's nice. I like that. Yeah, I like that. And in regards to mind, if you know, because we're not individuals, we don't exist as identities. So, and we're not thinking. It's not, the stream is not yours. So it just kind of goes as like you said, just like a process of self, and in the illusion of consciousness, in that consciousness itself is the illusion of separation. You know what I mean? Consciousness in time is the illusion of a self observing other. I don't know what you think about that. Consciousness itself is the illusion of separation.
Say that last bit again.
Consciousness itself is the illusion of separation. It's the illusion of a self observing other.
I think the reason I got lost is because I don't know what consciousness is, and I'm not remotely convinced that anybody else knows what consciousness is either. And the more I listen to learned people talking about consciousness, and I don't spend a lot of time doing that, but I spend a little bit of time doing that. And the more I listen to people talking about consciousness, the more, I want to say convinced, but perhaps I should just say suspicious I become that nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. There was I have quoted this before, but, indulge me. There was an encyclopedia of psychology. I think it was about in the 90s, the 80s or the 90s, and under the entry for consciousness, the compiler in the encyclopedia simply gave an extremely simple one-sentence description of it, and then underneath that just put nothing worth reading has ever been written about this. And now in 2021, I'm inclined to add to that, and nothing worth saying has ever been said about it. And one of the things that I notice is that there are people out there who are, it's like their speciality. Consciousness really is their speciality. And when two of them get together, it's pretty obvious after 4 minutes, they cannot agree what it is they're talking about. Now, if you and I were greengrocers and we got together and we couldn't agree what we were talking about when it came to apples, that would probably give rise to some suspicion in other people about whether we really were greengrocers. I don't know if that metaphor worked, but if not, forget it. Do you want to be on consciousness here? Well, possibly not.
Well, thank you for the time. And what I meant by consciousness, if I can have 30 more seconds, what I meant by consciousness is, if you are conscious that you are a self, and then obviously you're aware of other things. So you're consciously aware that, you're separate. And that's all I meant by it. But anyways, thank you for the time, and I appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to try one last thing here. I'm just going to say, try replacing any idea or thought or language about consciousness with just experience. It doesn't, there is experience. I'm going to claim that is irredeemably known. If somebody wants to come onto this show and argue that with me, you're welcome to. But until that happens, I'm just going to claim that, there is experience. That is known. In fact, that's the only thing that's known. To say that experience arises in consciousness, or we can become aware of consciousness, adds nothing to that. It doesn't add anything to the simple sentence. Could
you expand on what is experienced and who is experiencing it?
Say that again.
Respectfully, could you expand on what is experienced and who is experiencing it?
I can't expand on the first part of that. I would say experience is self-evident and there's nothing else to be said about it. Who is experiencing it? No one's experiencing it. You know, the sensation of separation is that I am experiencing my experiences. What we're talking about this evening is the possibility of that sensation, if you like, collapsing, and then there is simply
that which is experienced
without the need for an experiencer.
I think I heard somebody say that the other day. That which is experienced. It's yeah. But thank you so much. You guys are great.
I can see some.
Thank
more.
you so much, Howard. I have a couple more questions here that are written. Want me to read it to you, Richard? And then we'll go to William, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, read them out. Yeah.
All right. If we are in a dream, who is the dreamer? How can you tell that this is a dream?
Do you want to go to that one? Or not?
Well, it's not a dream. I mean, it's nothing like a dream. So it's just that, I mean, the end of the illusion of self doesn't make it dreamlike. You know, it's just. It seemed to be. It just changes the quality of experience in a way, because it's seen that there's absolutely nothing, and that continues and stuff arising, but it's in a sense it's more real and it's real and unreal. It's nothing like dreamlike. So I can't. Yeah, dream it's got much more reality to it than the previous identification experience of identified life. This is much more real and totally unreal at the same time. So I don't know. That's how I experience it. I might turn the heating down.
Okay. I've used the metaphor. I've probably used it this evening. In fact, you know, that this is a dreamed character, but that's a metaphor. You know, it's a metaphor for the recognition that this is not, you know, this character does not have the reality that it always believed it had until that sense of self dropped away. And in those terms, who is the dreamer? Well, there is no dreamer. We could say oneness is the dreamer if you like, but that's a bit suspect because, again, you know, it's just language, but we're personifying oneness. You know, there is no dreamer. There is no dream. There is just what's happening. But talking about it as a dream is a way of trying to explain certain aspects. And also, how can you tell that this is a dream? That's the third part of this question. How can you cannot tell that this is a dream? Of course you can't, but when you're not there, then, well, it's another metaphor. When you're not there, then this is seen through. What does that mean? It means that the belief or the apprehension that there are two things here, there's the world and there's me experiencing the world, that collapses. So that apprehension is seen through. It's seen through that, if you like, that was always a story, another metaphor, that was always a dream, again, a metaphor.
And it's somatic as well, because it's felt differently. So it's felt like there's nothing here. There's a weightlessness to the body. It's real in the sensory experience of this. It's there's nothing, and it's known as well, so it's known beyond the mind too. And it in the event, it can be visually seen, so there's a visual component to this, like an illumination as well. So it's, you know, it's very clear, and the ongoing experience of that it's just known, and it's very hard to say how that's known, but it is very, very clear that this is just utterly unreal and yet appearing at the same time, real at the same time. So it's, yeah, it's strange. Yeah,
that reminds me of another way in which I use the word dream, you know, in a way as a kind of metaphor, and that's the idea of a nighttime dream. You know, I mean, we all know what it is to experience a completely different reality to this waking dream, if we call it that. We all know what it's like to experience a completely different reality, and that other reality is utterly and totally convincing until it isn't, and that's in a nighttime dream. So speaking conventionally, we go to sleep, there is a dream. In that dream there is, if you like, a me who is a dream character, but that is totally real. It's completely real. You know, unless there's a kind of waking up in the dream, which, you know, so I'm not going to talk about here. So a kind of normal level of dreaming, it's completely real until it ends, and when it ends, it's seen to be completely unreal. So that's just a kind of, you know, it's just a metaphor really, to try to bring to life through words something about this when it's really impossible to bring it to life through words. Yeah.
Maybe lucid dreaming can give you a bit more of a flavor of that, because you're waking up in the dream knowing you're dreaming, so you're aware of that. I mean, it's not, at the same time, it's nothing like that, because when you wake up in the dream, you know, you can reinvent the dream. Sometimes, if you're lucky in a lucid dream, you can, I want to be in this environment, then maybe that will happen, so you can change the whole scene of the dream, the whole story of the dream sometimes. But yeah, so it's an interesting one as well. So, but it's yes, it's not quite the same as this.
Thank you. There's a couple more comments here, and then we'll go to William and then John Luna. Angela goes, I love this format with you too. It's like a 2-for-1 deal for nobody. And there's another comment here from Ray. I love your quotes interview, and I am wondering if you're going to have a part 2 coming up soon. That interview actually gave me a glimpse, and I have been hooked on watching you and also Emerson's interview with other speakers. Thank you. I was skeptical about this message until that video, because I used to hold on to those quotes quite dearly.
Cool.
It's great.
Yeah.
William, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi again. I've got a question. Richard, I watched a video of you from a while back where you were saying that the seeing of liberation can happen under there's no circumstance necessary, in as much as somebody could be doing spiritual practice and it could be seen or not. Somebody else could be cycling down the country road and it could be seen or not. So it's just because I'm really fascinated with this uncompromising non-dual message, maybe obsessed with it, and I can't get enough of it. But is it so? It's just as likely somebody might never come across this communication and just be involved in a dualistic teaching, and still there's the dropping away of the sense of self.
The reason I'm not answering immediately is because I'm just hovering over that phrase, just as likely, and I want to take that out of the question in a way, because I think that simply can't be known, you know, that sort of just as likely. So take that out, and I would say, yeah, this seeing, I think, yeah, if you like, the evidence is, but certainly also there's a kind of, I think, a direct apprehension of that, yeah, this can arise, you know, if you like, anytime, anywhere, for anyone. Yeah.
Could I add, from like Steve Taylor's, he researches this, I think he's a senior lecturer at Leeds University. Maybe it's not Leeds. Anyways, it seems to be that pain, suffering is the biggest kind of, you know, opener to this, you know, grief, you know, shock, trauma is the biggest, you know, known from his own study. He did a PhD as well. He studied 25 people, and 5 of them woke up in therapy, actually. But I think because they were going into their trauma stuff. So it's pain is certainly often in the story before awakening.
Okay.
Which isn't the path, obviously, but, you know, extreme pain, extreme suffering.
There are commonalities that he Sorry.
Can I kind of wind it back a little bit as well, and just throw in, of course, another thing to recognise. I mean, obviously, no one is going to set up the idea that a path to liberation is to engage in extreme suffering until one becomes near suicidal. Well, actually, having said that, of course, if I think of some of the religious traditions with their flagellation and self-torture, they might get pretty close to that anyway, but kind of forget that. But to wind it back a little bit also, let's remember also, suffering arises or it doesn't. Extreme suffering arises or it doesn't. Suicidal feelings arise or they don't. In other words, whatever we feel about whether there's a path that might get me to this, excuse the language there or whatever we feel about whether there is or whether there isn't, we can roll it back one stage, if you like, and again, and recognize, but there is nobody who is, if you like, choosing to take that line or have that attitude. So in other words, if I go and sit at the foot of the master and meditate for some years, which I have done, and very enjoyable it was as well, but there was nobody who chose to do that. That was again something that apparently happened in this dream of a character called Richard, who seems to have a past.
Yeah, I guess the reason I've realised, the reason I asked the question was because I have a fear that I need to do the right things, because if I do the wrong things, it will prevent this. But you've clearly just said there's no one choosing anyway, so it's almost like I can't get it wrong.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely cannot get it wrong. Yeah. You can't get it right either.
But you'll probably still try to get it right, because that's what happens. Yeah. Like it's
without
impossible.
Question. That's great. It was worth asking that question. Thank you.
As long as there's someone there, again, I'm sorry to be tautological. As long as there's someone there trying to understand, then there's someone there trying to understand. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I've been asked for advice quite a lot over the years, and of course I have no advice to give, but I usually end up saying, sometimes in a state of kind of some despair myself, if it's possible to relax, then just relax. And one of the things in a way that you're raising there, and that Dawn's commenting there, is the shoulds and oughts in the mind. The shoulds and oughts in the mind that does not actually exist. Am I doing this right? Should I be doing something different? Should I be meditating for longer or doing a different kind of meditation? I mean, as long as that's there, that's there. But if there's any opportunity to just relax and tell those thoughts to fuck off, then that's quite, I'm just going to say that's quite relaxing, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I find your story fascinating, Richard, because about all the seeking you did, because I've never been involved in any practices. I've read a few books on spirituality over the years, but then I always got put off by the practicing because I was always too lazy. I'd read the book and then I'd get to the bit of the practice and I'd think, skip that, read the next. But then when I came across this message and it was clearly like non-prescriptive, I just thought, oh, this is great. I'm not being told to do anything. Like, it resonated in that way.
Well, I don't want to start, set off more searching here, but I will throw in that there are practices out there which you can do in a very, very lazy way. And I'm saying nothing more about that. Those were the sorts of practices I was attracted to, the really lazy ones. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you both.
Go ahead, John.
Hi, how you doing, Richard and Dawn? You guys are great. Richard, I read your book, The Book of No One, and then I saw you had another one, I Hope You Die Soon. And I just thought it was funny because over here, it just feels like, I don't think you would have named the book, I Hope You Die Slowly. So it just feels like that's kind of been the journey here. And every time there's a feeling of this clarity and seems self-evident, and then something happens in life that kind of overwhelms it, and then I'm feeling, oh, that's just feels a million miles away. So I know the only thing that would want to anything to die or the ego to collapse is the ego. So I don't know how do I view this as someone who's sort of been in this for a while and has, you know, oscillating in and out of clarity, it's seemingly anyway. And, you know, obviously there's a desire for this to, you know, come to rest, and just that dilemma, because there's a desire and that pushes me into action, but then there's the desire is for rest. And so I'm kind of just, I guess that's where the mind maybe can collapse, but maybe you can help me a little bit. I think that's, and I don't want to be too confusing, but I think you get me.
Shall I go for that? Yeah. I wish I could. You know, I mean, I say that you know, although this is indescribable, the closest experience that gets to it, if you like, is relaxation. And I often quote, I think it's Kenneth Dowman wrote, relaxation is the key to Buddhahood right here, right now, which I think really gets the spirit of this. But it's quite clear in a way, you know, there's no advice I can give. I did long ago come up with a mantra. I was actually sitting in a talk by another speaker, and Nathan Gill, this was many years ago, and it kind of was suddenly blurted out of my mouth as if by the word, by the sound of God or whatever. This mantra came to me as I was sitting there, and it was hopeless, helpless, meaningless. You know, it is hopeless, we are helpless, it is meaningless. And it just leapt out of me into the meeting. And then in the tea break, somebody came up to me, somebody I knew faintly, put their arm around my shoulder and said, "Richard, that was the most depressing thing I've ever heard anybody say." And I turned around and kind of automatically started to apologize to them. And they said, no, it was great. It's great. There's something in that. I mean, in a way, this may sound light-hearted. In another way, it isn't. You know, there is something in there quite serious that I'm trying to get at. And the phrase that comes to me, it's about letting go. You know, we can't let go ourselves, of course, but somehow, if there is a recognition that, you know, we are helpless, that's not the right way to put it, because we're not really helpless. It's just that we don't exist. But just kind of play along with the language for the sake of this. You know, if there's a recognition of, let's call it helplessness here, there really isn't anything that can be done about this here that might produce a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of release of tension, right? If it's also recognized that my case is hopeless in that sense, you know, there isn't anything that I can do about my dilemma, you know, because there isn't a me that exists that can take action, however much it seems as if there is. So in that sense, it may be recognized that, you know, not only I am hopeless, but this situation, that I am helpless, but this situation is hopeless. You know, maybe that might produce some more relaxation. It may not, but maybe it might. And then the last piece of that is, if it is recognized that this is all completely meaningless, it's not going anywhere, there's no great story that has to be fulfilled, I'm not on a path, you know, to the heavens, you know, in a way where I have to please God in some way. I have to watch my every deed and my every word and make sure that I don't say fuck occasionally, because it might annoy the Almighty or the Buddhist angels or whatever it might be. You know, this is absolutely meaningless. It is without meaningless. Now that can be heard. It can be heard by some minds, you know, with despair, but that's not how it's meant, you know, and it can be heard. It can be heard with a huge sigh of relief. Again, relaxation. Oh my God, the realization that this is meaningless, and all those Hail Marys, those 300 Hail Marys I had to do before breakfast, and then the 15 minutes beating of myself with the cat o' nine tails after lunch. None of that was necessary, because none of that was going anywhere or getting me anywhere. You know, there's no God to please.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing to be fulfilled. This is already whole and entire. Well, just that. This is already whole and entire. It's not going anywhere, and it doesn't have any meaning, and it doesn't need to have any meaning because it's whole and entire in itself. So somehow, if there's even an apprehension of some of that, even just on a mind level, that can produce some relaxation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, John. There's a whole bunch of questions here. This one is from Lori999. What are insights? What is sudden understanding? Are those part of the story? Thank you.
Insights. Well, you can have energetic illuminations of aspects of awakening, for sure. What are they? I don't know. That's a, yeah, before awakening, certainly some people, yeah, like I've done myself, you can see, you can understand an aspect of this, but it's not the same as awakening. So it can be like a partial awakening. And certainly you can have partial glimpses in a meditation as well. But like, so seeing, in my own case, when I saw that everyone was awake, and then seeing the veils, seeing the Buddha nature of everyone. So they're visual. When I woke up, actually in the morning before I woke up, I looked in the mirror and I saw my child self look at me, and as if it, you know, it wasn't like that, it was that. And it's so almost like a sort of indication of a return to innocence or whatever, but it seemed to convey something of this to me, some aspect of it. And as the day went on, I seemed to have illuminations of different aspects before the self fell away completely and love was seen. So these things do happen as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I would say, you know, insight and understanding is of the mind. But what I wanted to add is that, again, it's fairly common. I mean, this happened here, and I've talked to quite a few other people where it's happened, that even just a split second seeing of what we're talking about here can then produce a lot of kind of mental understanding, a lot of mental insight afterwards. There's a kind of natural energetic thing, you know, not in the sense that the mind worries at it or works at it in any way, but just kind of things seem to spring up. So for example, here, a lot of things, I mean, there are a lot of sayings and stories in Zen, which to my mind, when I had a mind, very puzzling indeed. Like, what the hell do these, you know, what the hell is going on here? What are these monks talking about? And there's something about, as I say, even just a sort of split second seeing of this, and suddenly it becomes clear when it's, you know, just with that kind of recognition of, oh, as I say, it might just be for half a second, but that recognition, oh, there really is no one here. That's not a metaphor, you know, it's not a kind of image, it's not a kind of romantic or flowery way of talking about something spiritual. It is quite literally a description. Oh, there really is nothing here. And then some of those kind of Zen sayings and other strange ideas that mystics tend to come out with, not spiritual teachers. I mean, spiritual teachers tend to talk in terms which we can kind of understand with the mind, but mystics tend to come out with things which sound totally, you know, just like, what the hell can possibly be meant by that? And then just that split second recognition that, there really isn't anyone here. And then, oh yeah, that's what that meant. That's what that meant. That's what that Zen teacher was trying to get at, or whatever it might be.
And sometimes it could be like around when awakening happens, there may be an accompanying voice, and it's often said like a voice saying, this is what you've been running from your whole life. Or in like in Eckhart Tolle's case, he saw an image of a diamond or something that almost like an indication this is what's happened, you know, like it, so that there's that energetic stuff that happens around it, almost like verifying the experience as the identification falls away. So yeah, there's that as well. There's sort of wisdom that's, yeah, not impersonal wisdom, if you like.
Yes, it's like somehow the self disappearing makes a space for impersonal wisdom to just come flooding in, right, which can then produce the kind of insight that I was talking about. I mean, one example, I mean, I've quoted this many a time, my favorite Christian mystic from about the 14th century, who said, until I see that I am nothing, I cannot see that I am everything. And so the seeking Richard, going to gurus and meditating and so forth, puzzles over, what the hell can that mean? What on earth can that possibly mean? But then the moment this collapses, it's like, oh, yeah, of course, I am nothing. You know, it wasn't a metaphor, it wasn't an image. She wasn't trying to say something poetic. She was simply describing something as literally as she possibly could. Oh, of course, yeah, I am nothing. Until that's seen, it can't be seen that I am also everything.
There's a question here from Saket G. How can today exist without yesterday? If we didn't have food yesterday, wouldn't we be hungry today? Doesn't this validate the existence of a past?
You want to go for that?
Well, yeah, if you didn't have food yesterday, you'd probably be starving or not. Yeah. Well, it past exists and time exists and doesn't exist. Your relationship to that changes phenomenally. I mean, on an experiential level, time is, you know, when someone is with, I don't know, when you're with somebody, you're very much more present with them. And when they leave, they're very much more absent than they ever were. So that reality is restored to what's actually happening. And when someone disappears or something changes, it's very much left behind. It's very much, it kind of dissolves. So there's very little reality to that. But yeah, I mean, if you don't eat, you're going to feel the effects of that. So it exists and it doesn't exist. But yeah, it's very light. I guess that's why boredom is rarely experienced, rarely if ever, because the sting of time is taken out because everything is okay as it is. Whatever's occurring is fine. So
yeah, time is both real and unreal. As I've said, it's unreal in an absolute sense, but the character lives in time. It's real in that sense. It's real to the character. And if you're ever with a non-duality speaker who simply says, well, time is unreal, there is no such thing as time, and leaves it at that and won't say anything else about it, I suggest that if it's a live meeting, which we may have again one day, you could rush the stage, debag them, search for their wallet in their trouser pockets and triumphantly produce from it their return ticket to Brighton or wherever it was they came from. I mean, of course, for the character, time exists.
And as Tim Freak said, you couldn't even understand a conversation without time. So, you know, time is necessary to make sense of things too. So
it's, I mean, I've not come across many cases where there's been this seeing of non-duality and then the one who has seen it starves to death because they have a failure to feed themselves after that. I mean, if it happens, it doesn't seem to happen very often.
And I think we have the last question here from Jack Saturday. Is knowledge all memory and memory all past and past non-existent so that there is finally no knowledge?
Ouch, I didn't understand that. Is it on here?
Yes,
look,
it is.
You can read it ourselves. That's very complicated. Can you read that? Is knowledge all memory and memory all past and past non-existent so that there is finally no knowledge? Did you say that was the last question, Amazon?
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we might be able to get away with not answering it, then I don't know. I mean, it's so abstract to me. It's so abstract that nothing is coming. Do you want to have a go?
Well, knowledge is off the mind. It's all conditioned, isn't it? And knowing, the seeing of non-duality is beyond the mind. It's beyond that. It's the end of knowledge in a sense. So it's seeing through knowledge. It's takes you beyond that. So there's just nothing, and that is seen. I don't know, does that answer? It doesn't answer the question, does
It's
it?
pretty good stuff.
And yeah, no.
If I don't know if this will work if I relate this to the last question, what I was saying about time both being unreal and real, that in a sense, I mean, absolutely, I would say a sense that knowledge is overthrown by seeing this. Yeah, knowledge, what the mind thinks it knows, particularly about meaning, life, meaning, path, purpose, what God wants me to do and all of that sort of thing. Certainly, I would say in that way, knowledge is completely overthrown by this. On the other hand, of course, in another way, knowledge continues. I know where the fridge is, and I intend to be traveling to it fairly soon. And I know the route there as well. And without that, we'd be back to starvation, which was what I think the last question was about.
Yeah, and you don't need the mind for that, because so it's all known anyway. So yeah, the mind is overrated.
Oh yes, the mind's definitely overrated. Yeah.
It appears that there's another question that popped in at the last couple of minutes from Macrad. From your perspective, what do you think of this seeming intention, not from any self or ego, but of the whole of life, i.e. evolution, procreation, the happening seems to have an inherent intention? It's the final Jeopardy question there, so.
Yes, it seems to. There's no doubt that it seems to the mind, yeah. This seeming intention, yeah. It's great for creating stories about meaning and cosmic consciousness and all sorts of wonderful things, but essentially there is what's happening, and in what's happening, stories about intention and evolution appear.
Yeah, because in the story, it seems it's very easy to posit an intention, because life does seem to tend towards greater and greater complexity and greater consciousness as well, certainly in our case. So it's very easy to, I mean, who knows? Maybe there is like an intention. I certainly wouldn't know of it, but yeah. So
we could add to this long list of what we are, starting with meat robots. We are meaning making machines. We are meaning seeking missiles, in fact. I mean, I won't start going on at length about this now, as it's late, and also it's not strictly relevant, but I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, if you like, from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, I mean, seeking meaning, seeking patterns, which is basically seeking meaning, is absolutely fundamental to our psyche. Somebody mentioned the brain earlier. I have no idea whether brains do or do not exist, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but if they do exist, they're certainly very, very good at seeking meaning. So yeah, that's just something that the separated person not only does, but it seems to have considerable survival value as well. Yeah, if you didn't see pattern and meaning in the glimpses of the tiger's flank as it crept up on you, you would be eaten very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Well, oh, somebody's just written meaning-seeking missiles, great for a t-shirt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's market those. Yeah.
And who knows? Who knows anyway?
Yeah, who knows anyway?
Maybe. Yeah. Who knows? So non-duality is the seeing that what you took as your self, the identification with the mind and with the body, falls away, and all the energy that was in that is just totally released and floods into what is. So there's an at homeness in just being. So it's the realization of all of your desires, all desire is satisfied in the seeing of this. So everywhere you are is sufficient. Everything is sufficient unto itself. So you're totally where you are. So there's a complete release from this constricted, time-bound entity. So it's moving into the timeless. So peace is in just being. And so, yeah, so your true being is love, and there's an unloveness with everything that is. And there's no need for anything external to add to that. It's the end of seeking. It's the end of looking for something to make you more sufficient in any way. It's just the total resting in being. So it's very oceanic in a sense, as in it's very womb-like. It's everything in the moment is provided for, so nothing is needed. So for during a honeymoon period, in particular, there'll be no need to change anything. Everything is perfect just as it is, and that perfection is also seen. It can be visibly seen. It can be, the sacred can be seen in everywhere you are. So in nature, for instance, where it's really clear, there's a dimension of the sacred, of stillness that permeates everything. So it's incredibly absorbing. So where you were previously absorbed in the mind, suddenly the absorption is in what, you know, what is and what you're looking at and where you are. So it's a total release of tension into that. And the seeing usually has usually there's a seeing of emptiness first of all, which is just seeing that the mind is not you, and that there is no one. The physical disappears, the boundary between the physical and everything disappears, and any sense of ownership of any of that disappears. Is not replaced by anything. It doesn't need any replacement. It is just life being life living us, if you like. It's just yeah, there's an ease, a sense of ease, and a sense of, it's not really relaxation in the sense that there's actually quite a lot of energy, but it's a still energy. So it's just a restful energy, which often comes with a very subtle sense of bliss as well. So when you come to rest, particularly when you sit, there's a kind of a lovely kind of coming to rest in everything. Yeah, so that's it. So it's the end of separation. There just is everything that arises, and the character still continues to live, and that still matters. The character's life still matters, but it's not. Yeah, it's just that ownership that is gone now. So it doesn't matter in the same way. There's an acceptance of everything about that character. And even if there's non-acceptance of something, that's okay too. So everything's okay. So it's a really good, I don't know, it's just a very good place to be. So yeah, so that's oneness, and it's love, and it's very beautiful. And yeah.
Yeah, it's I'll just add a little bit, tiny bit to that. Yeah, it's just to stress this thing about it being the end of seeking, because it's the recognition, it's the end of the seeker, really, which entails the end of seeking. And it's just the recognition that which the seeker thought they were looking for can actually never be known. You know, so it's like we could almost say, you know, the questions all go away, not because they're answered, but because they are seen to be unanswerable and irrelevant, because the questions were asked from the point of view of the one who sat here feeling themselves to be separate from everything else. And from that position of separation, a lot of questions make sense. Like what? Well, any question which starts with the question, what will happen to me if, or what will happen to me when, you know, what will happen to me when I die, for example, or it could be anything else. And all of these questions just simply collapse when it's seen, hang on, there is no me. You know, it's just irrelevant. What will happen to me when? What will happen to me if? Well, it just doesn't apply, because there isn't a me, there is just what's ever happening. Always whatever's happening, yeah. And I can see we've got some questions coming up here already. So I'll start by reading some of these out, and Emerson can let us know if somebody wants to come on live. So the first question here is, would you say liberation is a relaxation, a final breathing out?
It's not relaxation in the normal sense of doing something to chill out, which is often a lower kind of energy. So it's a heightened energy. It's because there's so much more awareness of all experience. The focus that was normally narrowed is kind of widened. So kind of there's much more panoramic kind of view. It's almost like you're literally seeing the bigger picture. So there's an intensification of energy, but like I say, it's a still energy. So it's sweet. It's sweet, and there's a really dropping into rest. The word relaxation doesn't resonate so much because I associate that with a kind of almost release of some kind. So it's a heightened energy that's totally peaceful and at one with itself and doesn't need any stimulation. It's free from all that. So it's free from it's sufficient unto itself.
I like the idea that it's a breathing out. I'm not so sure about the idea of, it says here, is it a final breathing out? I mean, my guess is the final breathing out would be death. So I'm not going with that one, but I very much like the idea that it's a breathing out. It's a sort of an exhalation. It's a kind of, if you like, a sort of a feeling of relief. I mean, none of those words get it, but they get, somewhere close to it. And I've quoted quite often this phrase from, it's actually from a Dzogchen Buddhist, relaxation is the closest thing to Buddhahood. So I'll go with that as well.
And it is a kind of death. I mean, it's death. The mind seems to, like, it just withers and dies. There's no association with that. It's never, like, it really seems like central to experience, and that just totally, it falls away. It's like a pop balloon. It really is like that. There's, you can observe the mind when it appears, which appears much less often, or definitely less for some people. And in my own case, it can go for a long time. But when it's there, it's not. There's a distance from that. It's not real. It's lost its reality. It's lost its central core from where you operate. It's totally gone. It was never necessary. It's so unnecessary. You just fall into your natural knowing, which is much more sweet. So
yeah, this recognition that the mind that I might have taken myself to be doesn't even exist. There's just a flow. That everything is simply a flow. Everything is a process, we might say. And one of the most obvious of those processes is the flow of perception, including thoughts, which we usually think of as the mind. Yeah. Anything else on that?
No.
Read the next message from here. John Blake wants to know, what is it like to have a non-dual relationship? And the question is for both of us.
Come
on, yeah.
In relationship, it is interesting because there seems to be there's a kind of merging with whatever arises. So that dropping away of the self, it's like, so there's a total being with whomever you're with, which is great in terms of listening to or being with, but it's also, there's nothing to grab hold of, and that's what it's really, there's just no boundary. It's much more intimate, but without the normal intimacy. There's no needs in that. So there's just this kind of pure relating. So in relationship, it's just a pure being with. It's there's none of the normal. I'm speaking for myself, but the games and all the fantasy stuff falls away. So you realize how much the mind gets in the way of things. So you're relating without the mind, which means you're not really interested in fantasy and people who relate from the mind. It's just a pure being with what's appearing. So whatever's happening in the moment in relationship is a total thing, and you're not carrying all that baggage. So it's a dropping into what's occurring between you and someone else, which is really quite beautiful. Yeah,
I'd say everything becomes more immediate, because experience is no longer mediated through or filtered through, through the person or through the personal mind. So just everything becomes more immediate. And then, of course, the mind has its specialities, and where relationships are concerned, one of the mind's specialities is game playing. So, the game playing is likely to drop away, and there's just more raw whatever is actually happening without the mind playing its monkey tricks to tangle whatever is actually happening up into some complex and usually not very healthy or helpful story. Yeah. So it's just everything becomes simplified, I would say. Yeah. Anything else there?
No.
I'm going to read one more of these, and then I'll see whether Emerson's got anyone who wants to come on live yet. From Deepak Handa, is the me, in inverted commas, is the me a contraction in the physical body or in the mind?
Oh, well, do you want to say, or shall
I? Well, I'll have a go at that first, if you like.
Okay.
Is the me a contraction in the physical body or in the mind? It's simply a contraction in the total system. I mean, I'm aware that already today we've been using the word the mind as if it actually existed. So it's at this point that I'm going to throw in what I usually do to remind ourselves that actually, because there isn't such a thing as the mind. There's no thing, the mind, which somehow is more what I am than my physical body. There is simply a process of experiencing, which we call the mind. I mean, the experiences that we most relate to the mind, of course, are thoughts. So there's a process of thinking that we think of the mind, but also any experience. And the contraction, it can't be said in either way, that it is simply a contraction which is held, it's an apparent contraction which appears to be held in the kind of totality of the being. But the interesting thing about this contraction is that it's not really noticed usually until it's gone. It's a strange thing, because one of the things that might happen in awakening is the recognition that there was a contraction there, a tightness, if you like, in the system, which was never recognized before. And now it's recognized at the moment that it's gone, and it's recognized precisely because it has gone. And I mean, I won't say very much about that, but just to add one other thing about that, the reason for this is because the contraction in the kind of physical and mental and emotional system, it's like it's always been there. It's always there. It's not noticed. It's like it seems to be my natural state of being because it's always been there. So when it disappears, that's when it's noticed. And that's when it's recognized that what seemed like my natural state of being always had this kind of tightness about it, this reservation, almost like a holding back from life about it. So when it's gone, it's gone. And this is why some people say, well, there is a sound to waking up. There is a sound to awakening. There is a sound to self-realization. And that sound is an exhalation of relief. A sort of as this contraction leaves the system.
I would just say that my experience, the physical almost disappears. So to even speak of contraction, it's like almost like it's not, there is no physical anymore. It's almost like there is just what is. There's no sense of anyone being here, and that includes the physical. So they're just words and coming out of, might as well be air. It's just, there's no sense of any somatic sense of anything being here at all. It's just, could be a breeze, it could be anything. So yeah, it's just a total loss of the mental and physical, all of it. And there's just, yeah, there's just what is. And I guess the physical is part of that, but there's no sense of anyone being in here or anything to be in, or in any sense of tangible. Yeah, so yeah, it's almost like being pure spirit. That's what it feels like, just being formless. So for me, it's, yeah, contraction doesn't, it wouldn't be the word I would use. It's just the end of the physical. It's the end of the mental and the physical. It's a ghost. Not even a ghost, not even that, just emptiness, just emptiness. But I love it.
I'm just wondering, Emerson, whether there's anybody who wants to come in live before we look at the other questions here.
Yeah, if anyone wants to raise, to ask a question live, you can click on, people that are on YouTube, you can click on the link that's on top to be able to ask a live question. If people that are here, you can also raise your hand and I'll call you. So far, it's just a whole bunch, lots of questions here. They're piling up.
Shall I go on with these written questions?
Yes,
then?
please go ahead.
Hell, I hoped you were going to rescue us from the next two questions, which is what is reality, and then the one after that is what is death. But then we're going to have to face those then, shall we? What is reality? Should we go with those? With that? Shall I, or shall you?
Go for it.
Oh, go for it. Thank you very much. What is reality? Whatever you want it to be. It's a word. Define it how you like. So I will say reality is whatever's happening. Whatever's actually happening. In other words, phenomena. Phenomena are, reality is phenomena. Whatever's happening. Oh, words are being spoken, sounds are being heard, movement is apparently happening. And that is reality. And reality is also, if you like, that is everything. And reality is also the nothing out of which the everything is appearing, and they are the same. They are not different. So it's not that there is nothing and out of that there is everything which appears, because that's pretty obviously a dualistic description. It's not that. That's just the way of speaking. It's just the way that language works. Actually, everything is also nothing. This hand moving, this mouth moving, these sounds coming out are everything and also nothing, both, because they're not both, they're just the same thing. This is nothing moving, and this is nothing speaking, and this may be nothing thinking. So reality is whatever is actually happening. It's nothing and the everything, which is the same.
Yeah, there's not much to add to that. I suppose in the initial saying, it's visible, that can be visible, that emptiness, which, so, but it's so deeply known and it's so deeply experienced, and it's always experienced. So there's a sense of not deriving anything from anything, and in a sense of experience, you can't get something out of a situation or anything. There's a kind of purity to that, as in a way. There's nothing that can add to anything, because there's nothing there that could be added to. So it's the end of any kind of accumulation of anything. Yeah, there's just pure emptiness, out of emptiness, and out of which everything arises. So yeah, it's experienced very differently in a way. So yeah, that's reality, is totally unreal, totally nothing happening, and yet this arising, and that's experienced moment to moment.
Well, I guess we haven't been rescued from what is death, which is the next question that's come up. Thank you, Emerson, for not rescuing us. What is death? Do you want to go for that, or
Oh,
should I?
someone raised their hand. Want me to
Well,
call
I think, okay, well, I think as an act of good faith, I think we'd better tackle what is death, then we'll take the raised hand.
All right. All right.
Do you want to go for that? Or?
Well, there's nothing to say.
not.
I mean, death is just the end of the physical, the end of that. I mean, you know, we can't say any more of it. Anything else goes into metaphysical speculation, which I find fascinating. But yeah, so it's just the end of the physical, and the sting of that, when thinking about that, is removed because identity is no longer dependent on the physical. So but I think if I was facing death, I might feel very differently. But in contemplation of that, it seems to lose its hold somehow. It doesn't seem so powerful or so important. It seems, because this is in a sense a living death, but a beautiful, loving, living death. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, death is the end of the dream of separation. Indeed, yeah. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
We have a hand raised, so we can move on. Yeah, okay.
Hello, Richard. And gee, I forgot your name.
Don.
Yeah.
Hi, Eugene.
Okay. I think, Dawn, when you were saying that there was nothing to be added or into a relationship or something, I'm thinking about physical contact and having a nice dinner. Do those things disappear?
Oh God, no.
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 Yeah. I mean, that sounded so stale to me.
No, it's lovely. No, going out for dinner, like the intimacy of that, like I love stuff like that. Like I always did, and I think it's great. And it's like, is it even more because you're just so much more with, you know, with the food, with the person,
Right.
and,
Right.
yeah, and a glass of wine and whatever
Right.
it is. It's lovely. It's
Okay. I thought the way you were describing it, it sounded like everything disappeared.
oh
All
God,
those-
you just
Oh, okay.
you're so where you are, like, so, you know, like yeah, it's really, really important. It's really nice to share stuff with somebody else like that. There's a real beauty in that. So yeah, relationship is actually really enhanced by this. So yeah, definitely.
So there are two levels to this, I would say. There's the level of the physical, which doesn't disappear, which you still want to go out and eat and have intimacy with your partner and all those things. And there's a level where there's nobody, and there's nobody doing these things, and there's nobody having contractions and being contracted, and nobody being realized. Is that also true?
Well, yeah, and then the physical relating as well, because you're not elsewhere, you know. So intimacy is, you know, that is more beautiful because of that. You know, you're not elsewhere going off in thought or anything like that. So there's a kind of really being with someone in you know, in a deep way, and the physical relationship as well is enhanced by that. So there's no, because you're more in the experience. So actually it's intensified by that. It's not a loss of that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And they're not two things. I mean, they coexist, if you like. I mean, they're not two things. They're the same thing.
Okay.
You know, the experience of whatever is being experienced. Let's say something is being experienced and enjoyed. You know, that's not separate from being nothing and everything. You know, it's not one and the other. It's all of it.
Okay. So being liberated and having a contraction of seeking is the same thing in the end.
Well, yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, in a way, it is. That's not what I meant. I meant,
No, no.
I meant enjoying as a body organism this wonderful glass of whatever it is, water, gin, vodka, tequila, who knows? Mmm, yummy. It's so having a kind of a sensory experience like that is not different from the reason I've stopped is because I can't describe it. It's not different from, you know, the non-contracted state,
Right.
although it isn't a state, right? Now you've thrown an interesting question in. If you remind me, it was about a kind of seeking, yeah? The contracted state of seeking. Yeah, well, the contracted state of seeking, of course, is still liberation. Everything is liberation. Everything is simply oneness doing its thing. But the contracted state of seeking sure as hell doesn't feel like liberation. Right. And so generally we could say as long as that contracted state of seeking is going on, liberation will not be realized. In other words, the body-mind organism sitting here will not realize that it is already liberated. I mean, the body-mind organism doesn't need liberation because it already is liberation. But if it's living with this contraction and this feeling that there's something missing and this feeling that I've got to try very hard to find whatever it is that seems to be missing, I mean, it's uncomfortable. So it may be liberation, but it doesn't feel like liberation. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but it's kind of sadomasochistic because I want to feel this liberation, but I don't feel this liberation. But I'm here at the same time trying to find this liberation, which causes even more suffering because I'm searching for that liberation. It's kind of like a vicious circle, if you can. But at the same time, I'm enjoying this conversation, and I don't know how to explain it.
I was just going to ask, being here, having this conversation, is it just absolute, total, pure suffering, or is there just a little bit of relief and enjoyment and peace from it as well?
I think just as with any relationship, there's a bit of both.
Yeah, there will be. Yeah, it's an interesting idea that until this is seen, as long as we're searching, I may regret saying this, but it's come to me. As long as we're seeking, it's like we have a relationship with oneness, which we are seeking. And that's very uncomfortable. Of course, when seeking is ended, there is no relationship with oneness anymore because there's no me and it.
There is only oneness.
There is only what's happening. Yeah.
But sometimes it seems that there isn't oneness because we believe that we have to seek oneness.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely.
I'm not trying to get this in my mind, but to bring this to a practical level, you like a nice dinner, but in society, things can go bonkers. Like, well, you want a nicer car, you want a nicer job, you want to dominate over other people so you can get ahead. Those are also types of seeking too. Do those things disappear? Or
well, yeah,
ambition?
Yeah, all of that disappears, and yet desires can still arise. But they tend. I mean, there's a honeymoon period during which actually it's unlikely that any of that will arise. It'll just be a sort of satisfaction with, even if you're in the worst relationship in the world, even that can be kind of embraced. So everything is there's a time in which you might kind of start to want to come back into the world and to do stuff, but it doesn't have that drive to it. So it's a kind of more natural kind of flow, or kind of bringing your life into alignment, if you like, with your kind of seeing. But yeah, it's not. There's no need in it. So there might be a desire to to climb up a hierarchy, to do well, it's out to change something, buy a nicer car, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, all that stuff continues to happen. It's just life, you know, if that's what you want. But it's not
That is
driven.
strong.
Yeah, there's no investment in that in the same way. So, but I think for a period of time, there can be a complete absence of that, really, because everything it's all provide for. Everything is enough. You don't really give a damn. Like, you just don't. So, you know.
I'm going to add that I think, you know, in separation, as it were, when we're seekers, most of our desire, well, a lot of our desires, at least, maybe most, perhaps all of them to some extent, have a kind of pathological element to the desire. And so what I would say is that, you know, when this is seen, that, you know, desire, of course, may still be there, but the pathological elements of it,
Right.
you know, fade, disappear, whatever. So we're just left, if you like, with pure desire. And I think it's important to say this because, of course, an awful lot of the spiritual parts, if you were a seeker like I was, you know, sort of following spiritual paths, gurus and so forth, I mean, a lot of those spiritual paths very strongly encourage asceticism. In other words, very strongly suggest that we have to give up our desires, our worldly desires,
Right.
in order to attain some spiritual goal. And I would say that that does cause a great deal of unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, I think I was under the misinterpretation of being a seeker and following this, that it should look a certain way. That it doesn't. It doesn't. And that's a big relief to me, because I'm trying to reach an ideal that's probably just in my head of how non-duality is, because non-duality encompasses everything.
Yeah, and of course some desires are simply pathological in themselves, and again, if that's the case, there'll be a tendency, it's not automatic, there'll be a tendency for those desires to disappear when this is seen.
Yeah, it becomes less instrumental as well. So there's certainly in my own case, there's more a sense of like just wanting to be around people I could really relate to, like, and just be with, you know, like, so there's, I don't know, it becomes more about love, I think, than gain, you know, but they're
Yeah.
not compatible. But,
No,
you know.
that's exactly why I'm here. I mean, I'm around people who I can talk to about this. This is not something I talk to at work, not at the coffee table. Nobody's understanding me. This is exactly why I'm here.
Yeah.
But that can be called love, because maybe we feel like we're on the same wavelength. But
Yeah.
when we're speaking with people who don't understand this, that's also love too, I would say. But we don't accept that. We want to get away from those situations and people. And for me, I think it's you know, learning to accept that and not trying to mold myself into a idea of a non-dual person who can accept everything. Yeah. Anyway, that was my spiel.
That's another great idea, that we meet on the spiritual path quite often, which can really screw us up. You know, I've got to be more accepting. I've got to be more accepting.
Right.
And then I can flagellate myself because I haven't been accepting. You know, like all of that tends to kind of just evaporate. It's just an idea. It's just mind stuff and mind story.
And also, if you're a bit of a people pleaser person, actually you may be less accepting. You know, that you might, you know, develop stronger boundaries and be able to sort of say no and actually go, no, I don't want that. You know, so it depends. It just becomes more healthy and more balanced, I think.
Yeah. If you don't question it, I think, then things become more healthy. But I've always questioned things in my life, and that's.
Well, keep questioning. No, that's good. It's good stuff there. Yeah.
All right. I won't take up any more of your time. Thanks so much, Richard and Dawn.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Do we have another live question?
No, but there's lots of written questions.
Okay, shall I go on with those then for the moment? Oh, well, I'm not going to censor these. I'm just going to take them no matter what difficulty they get us in. So following on the one about death, here's one. Does experience or what's happening continue to happen after the death of the body? Infinity and eternity seems to imply this. Does experience continue after the death of the body? Would you like to go for that one?
Well, if it didn't, we wouldn't be here. Yeah, experience. Yeah, there's only experience that continues.
No, after the death of the body.
Oh, after the death
yes,
of the body. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
okay.
I'm surprised
All right,
by
okay.
your
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm
certainty.
sort of thinking. I was sort of thinking that death of the body's already happened, but yeah, no, it hasn't. So, well, there's no way of knowing that, you know, unless you've had an NDE. And when a lot of people have had NDE say no, it doesn't, and they're unequivocal in that. But that's, for the rest of it, that's metaphysical speculation. So who knows? I mean, there's no reason why it wouldn't. But there's a sense of knowing that you can't know that and I'm comfortable with not knowing, and I think that's something you come into when you've seen this. So yeah, maybe it does. I mean, the physical seems irrelevant in a sense, so who knows.
Yeah, I think living in separation, that's an interesting question, because living in separation, it's a question that appears to maybe possibly have an answer. And of course, it's obvious that many people feel that they do have an answer to that question, and that when separation collapses, then the question, in a way, and other metaphysical questions all like that also collapse. You know, is there a soul? Is there rebirth? Is there life after death, and so forth? These questions just tend to collapse. I think it's part of the reason that relaxation increases when liberation is seen, because these questions can be extremely aggravating and bothersome to the mind, as long as the mind thinks that it might be able to find an answer. In the collapse of the self, it becomes quite obvious that there are no answers to these questions. I mean, we could call them baseless speculation if we like, but there is no possible answer. And so whatever part of the system might have been involved with worrying itself about such questions tends to just go away, go to sleep, give up, attend to something more important, like maybe having a nice ice cream or something like that, because these metaphysical questions cannot be answered. Well, of course they can be answered, but they can't be answered with any answer that will bear much scrutiny for more than about half a minute. So yeah, we just live happily, maybe, with the uncertainty.
But also the sense of separation can drop away in a near-death experience, and for that person, they would have a certainty about that. So that's a very different experience, and obviously it's not my experience, so I'm not going to comment on that. But so it's experienced very differently. So, but yeah, for me, I just say I don't know, but I find it very interesting. Like, so.
Yeah. Okay, there's no yellow hand up there on the screen, so I'm just going to go on with these questions that people are writing in. How is psychotherapy related to the path of non-duality, awakening, and liberation?
What is it? Well, psychotherapy is, I mean, stuff can survive awakening. So trauma can survive awakening. You might need to, you might want to deal with that, and psychotherapy is a way of dealing with that. Also, repression can survive that. You may not know. It's difficult after awakening, because there's a honeymoon period during which you couldn't really give a damn. If you're in an abusive relationship, for instance, you may not know about that, but you'd be completely content. So actually, but some of this stuff starts to come up to be seen at a certain point after awakening. So you might start to see stuff, and maybe you'll want to work on that in psychotherapy. Maybe you won't even need to. Maybe you'll just see it and correct how you're living. Trauma can lessen a lot, but yeah, you might want to work with it. So in a sense, you know, this stuff can, you know, can kind of go together, but it is kind of still mind body stuff. So, you know, you may wake up and be actually frightened to go into the psychological, because you might think, oh my God, you know, what if I lose my awakening? And I've heard a lot of people say that kind of thing. So it doesn't tend to happen, you know. So, but I think it's important for some people to bring their life into alignment with their seeing, to do, I don't know, whatever kind of work or relationship that's more conducive to just that kind of flow of your being, and kind of feels more natural, because maybe you're in a more better state in which to sort of self-actualize, to kind of all that stuff that's been put on hold because of low self-esteem and feeling like shit about yourself, all that kind of stuff. There's a time in which, you know, maybe you can start to really grow. So they can run together as well. So do you want to say anything?
No, I'm going to leave that one to you. Yeah. Any more about that, or shall we move on?
Yeah.
Because the next question I've already noticed is a very deep one. Are you still, I don't know which one of us this is to, are you still manipulating to avoid doing the dishes? But then in brackets, to be fair, it does say that was a joke, but I still think it deserves consideration. I have no idea which one of us that's to, or both of us, but I think I for myself, I'm going to give a firm no to that question. Are you happy to move on? Yeah, I didn't want to miss it out, because I think people out there, they can read this, they'll know if I'm censoring these questions.
That's the most profound question ever.
Well,
Can be.
it's the most profound one so far. We might get an even more profound one about doing the vacuum cleaning. The next question, I can't help but make sure I don't pick up bad karma, but that's an illusion, I guess. Yeah, do you want to go for that, or should I have a go for this? Well, again, yeah, it's a story, you know, the story of karma. It's a wonderful story. You know, living in separation, things kind of seem tough, and one of the bits of stuff that seem the most tough is that there's injustice, and we hate injustice. You know, we have an evolutionary brain which has evolved to very, very strongly dislike injustice, but there is lots of injustice. So what do we do about that? Well, we make up a story. We make up a story which will say ultimately everything will become just, and there's different versions of that story, but really there's only two fundamental versions. One is there is a kind of all-powerful God who will eventually make everything just by casting my enemies into hell, which will be delightful to me, because as everybody knows, heaven has a window through which I will be able to watch my enemies burn eternally. And I mean, that was a thought that was around in the very, very early years of Christianity. I didn't just think of that one. I think Augustine thought of it. And of course, the other story is the story of karma that says, well, you know, my enemies will get their just desserts in a different way. You know, my boss is horrible to me, but he'll be reborn as a frog. So, you know, like that can give me, you know, a tremendous amount of comfort. You know, as I sit at home in the evening, yeah, it's kind of, you know, really obvious why we will make up these stories as we live this life of separation, surrounded what seems to be an external world in which all of this stuff is happening, some of which is very unfair. And then, you know, there's other stuff that's going to be worrying as well, which we've already looked at about death. You know, oh, well, it might be nice to think that I can be saved, or that there's rebirth, the karma to be worked out, because that means that this will, you know, go on. So yeah, illusion. Yeah, I would use the word story. Yeah, it's a story which can be very comforting and which can apparently, but with a huge stress on the word apparently explain a lot of what is going on. And meantime, you know, when this all collapses, when the stories collapse and the sense of self collapses, then, you know, there's just whatever's happening. You know, is there karma? Well, yeah, as a story. Is there karma? Yeah, as an idea. Is there karma? Yeah, as words being spoken. Yeah. Is there God? Yeah, as a story, as an idea, as words being spoken. You know, for a few seconds, for maybe a minute or two. And then what is there? Then there's a cup of tea, or there's a walk to the park, or there's brushing the dog, or there's whatever's, you know, whatever's happening. So these stories do tend to collapse, and they do tend to lose their interest. You know, when this is seen, it goes back to the previous question as well about death, that part of that is about, it's just recognized they're completely unanswerable. So the mind tends to go, you know, boring. I think I'll have an ice cream instead.
Oh, I think they're interesting questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, but yeah, they're unanswerable. But
they're unanswerable, you know. Whereas, you know, is the ice cream shop open? That's answerable, that question is. Yeah. So go on. Okay, so you were talking about being formless, and Eugene's question is, being formless, question mark, that defeats physical contact and intimacy, question mark.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, it's paradoxical, this stuff. So it's the opposite, because contact, physical contact, there's nothing in the way of that. You know, when you're relating physically through the mind, it's still relating through this veil in a sense, and you're not quite where you are. So, you know, it's much more intimate. There's intimacy without that. There's intimacy with the physical, but it's enhanced by that. There's not a loss of that. It's much more in the moment. So, you know, like say, the fantasy tends to recede in that. It's actually when you're with somebody and when you're intimate with somebody, that's what's going on, and nothing else is going on. So it's actually the opposite. It doesn't, yeah, I can see to the mind, it doesn't really make sense, but it is, it's entering fully into that scenario. So yeah, it's enhanced, I would say, quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, intimacy is increased when the veils that cut us off from intimacy collapse. Yeah, absolutely. Is that it? Because
because there's no, you know, there's a total acceptance of yourself as well. So there's a total, you know, it's without the mind, it is just pure relating. There's no, it's much more natural. So you're relating from your natural state in a way. So it can only be good. It can only be good. Like, so yeah.
So there's another hand up now. If Emerson, you want to bring Radu?
Yeah, go ahead, Radu, and unmute yourself, and if possible, open up your camera. Radu, oh, there you go.
Hello.
Hello, Radu.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Don.
Hi.
Yeah, so I was the one with the question of if the experience continues after the death of the body, and the reason I asked it is because this sort of peeling away of the self has started to happen here for some time. And the more this not sure if deepening is the right word, but the more it goes away, there's a realization that I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And I really loved when you said you don't know the answer to these questions. Because probably looking at or listening to gurus and people talk about this, they sort of gave the impression that part of liberation is somehow understanding these things which are metaphysical. But my experience is that I don't understand anything. So, so I really love the fact that you said that it's not about getting an answer to these questions. Is that correct?
But I was sort of thinking, if you experience like an NDE or near death experience or something, it wouldn't be metaphysical in a sense anymore. It'd be your experience. It'd be just the experience of that. So in a way, there would be a knowing of that. That's not what's happened here. So for me, it's just speculation. So it would be very ordinary, I guess, like any of these kind of transpersonal experiences are. They're just very ordinary, just like this. So, but yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not interested in sort of the answer to the question. My worry was that I don't know the answer, and somehow there's a thought here or a belief that liberation brings about these answers, or I should know these answers. Yeah.
There's none. Yeah.
Well, great then.
No investment in any answer. There's none, like because it is accepted. It's so accepted that there is no answer. Like, so there's no struggle with it. Curiosity is just curiosity. It's innocent. It's just it's just arising, falling away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so until another hand comes up, we'll go on with these questions here. Meredith Lawson asks, is there an absolute reality?
Go for it.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's a short answer. Yeah, there is an absolute reality, and this is it. This is absolute reality because this is the only reality. This is nothing and everything. So absolute reality is whatever is happening. Yeah. I mean, if the question is meant metaphysically, and I don't know if it is, but if it's meant metaphysically, as in, is there an absolute reality out there which can somehow be apprehended, then the answer is equally absolute, and it's no, because that would just be an idea. That's just an idea. And it can be a very tasty idea for the mind. It can keep, I've often referred to the mind, and I'm not the only person to use this simile, many people do, that the mind is like a hamster on an eternal hamster wheel, going, I'm searching for the truth. I'm searching for the truth. If I keep on going, I'll find the truth. And of course, absolute reality is another word for the truth. But we all know that the hamster isn't going anywhere. We don't all know that the mind isn't going anywhere, but we do all know that the hamster isn't going anywhere. So just remember, the mind is a hamster, and that answers the question. There's no absolute reality in the metaphysical sense, but yes, this is absolute reality. This is as absolute as it can get, and it's also relative. It's both. At the same time, there's no difference between the relative and the absolute, just as there's no difference between nothing and everything, and there's no difference between silence and noise, and there's no difference between stillness and movement. They are the same thing. They are the same thing. Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
Nothing really, just that I have no idea what this is, like at the end of the day, like, I mean, who knows? Yeah, it is totally mysterious. Just coming back to that, it really is. So, don't know, the word absolute. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. The next one's for you from Kane. It's for Dawn. When you say it is experienced from moment to moment, who is experiencing it?
No one is experiencing it. It is just simply being experienced. Before it seemed to be Dawn experiencing it, like me in the world, and it's just experienced. There doesn't need to be, it's that paradoxical thing of there doesn't need to be a person experiencing or anyone experiencing this for it to be experienced. And it doesn't mean to say that the experience of the character doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, like it really does. This life matters, like, and you know, what happens matters. You know, in the same way, well, slightly, you know, it's obviously modified by awakening, but yeah, so it's experienced by no one. It's just experienced. Yeah.
Go on.
Oh.
Yeah, no hands up at the moment, so we'll go on with this. Jonathan Lowry. Oh, thank you. I love your books. Do you have plans to release a new book soon? That's to me, no, I don't. That's a simple answer to that one. Probably not anyway. And then the next part of the question, is Dawn going to release a book as well?
Well, there is a book being written very, very, very slowly. But yeah, maybe at some point. Yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed, if it keeps being written, maybe.
Monica asks, do you still react to politics?
That's one for you.
That's one for me. And then for you, I think, because there is the kind of quite a difference there, probably, maybe. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I see. I have quite a I don't know what to call it. I call it character. Yeah, I have quite a politically involved character. When I say involved, I mean within ideas. I don't actually get up off my arse and actually do anything. I'm far too fond of sitting in a chair to do that. But I have, you know, quite strong ideas about politics that, you know, come and go. And not just politics, you know, other things as well, society, philosophy, psychology, the way people interact. So, yeah, indeed. And again, I don't know whether there's any thought about this in the mind of the questioner or anybody else who's watching this. But of course, I think, you know, often when it comes to spiritual ideas, notice again the air quotation marks, there is maybe an idea perhaps that there's a should in here. Perhaps we shouldn't be, perhaps we should have risen above such things, just as I shouldn't care whether I get porridge or ice cream or tea or coffee because I have, you know, risen to a higher plane. Then perhaps I shouldn't care about what happens in society and on a political level and things like that. But no, it's just part of what's happening. You know, what is reality, what is absolute or relative reality, whatever's happening. So if thoughts about politics, reactions about politics, interest in politics or society arise, then they arise and they hang around for however long they hang around. And then who knows, the next thing that might arise might be looking at a tree in the park or having a cup of coffee. Who knows? Do you want to?
Well, the question, well, politically, well, I just don't think I have that kind of political brain. I just find it, unless it's kind of a philosophical take on politics, I'm just not interested particularly. I know roughly what's going on, but like, yeah, I just don't have that interest. It's not in me at all. So, yeah, so
yeah,
well, minimally, like, yeah.
So a very comprehensive answer there, yes and no.
No, yeah. I don't think anyone could upset me with politics or, yeah, that sort of opinion. No, not really. forgotten what the question was anyway. So.
Do you still react to politics? Yeah.
Never did.
Never did.
Never did. Couldn't care. Say what you want, but yeah. But,
there's an assumption in the question that doesn't apply to you. Yeah. Move on.
Yeah.
Okay, John has got his hand up, I can see there.
Hello. Hi, Richard. Hi, John.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, could the regular materialist view on the way this all is happening just not be correct? I mean, I've listened to quite a lot of non-dual teachers over the years, and ultimately everything they say doesn't really contradict that point of view. Could it not just be exactly how we think it is? There's lots of I'll let you say something. Do you know what I'm saying? Could it not just be that we are the materialist perspective is correct, basically?
You mean when you say the materialist perspective, you mean like physicalism? There is just the physical and that's it. Consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain, all of that. Yeah? Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that could be the case.
Yeah, it could.
Who knows?
Yeah, I feel like it's unlikely, but that's just my own kind of, I don't know, speculative thought. It could be. There's no way of knowing that. Well, not now anyway. So probably ever.
Yeah. I feel it's unlikely too. And the reason I feel it's unlikely is purely because I'm going to use this forbidden word. So please don't, try and get me to define it too much, but because of consciousness, or if you like, just the fact that we have experiences, make it as simple as that. There isn't anything that we know about physical matter or the nature of the brain physically. There's nothing that we know about it that explains why experience should exist. So that's the big gap, if you like. That's what some philosophers call the hard problem. Who cares in a way, but my own feeling is it's unlikely that physicalism is correct, but of course it's possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So it might be just that we don't sufficiently understand it yet, and it might be explained later on. But it doesn't seem to make it.
Yeah. A lot of people think it will be,
Right.
like Donald Hoffman and all these guys who are working on, his consciousness fundamental and stuff. But yeah, I mean, right now we don't know. We don't know jack shit, so we may never know.
My feeling is very strongly, and I could very well be wrong about this, my feeling is very strongly that consciousness, or the fact that there is subjective experience, will never be explained. I think there's the fact is that everything that we can ever know about the brain is on a physical level, and consciousness or experience consists of something subjective, subjective experience, which is not physical. So I think there's, if you like, a lot of, again, philosophers of consciousness acknowledge this, they call it the explanatory gap. And this is what they call the hard problem, jumping from the physicality of the brain. It doesn't matter how refined the level it might be, it doesn't matter how far you go into quantum physics, you're still trying to jump from the physical matter, if you like, to subjective experience. And I've listened to Donald Hoffman, and I find him, he's a very good presenter, and I find it absolutely fascinating. And at the end of an hour and a half of it, I want my hour and a half back, because I realise he said precisely nothing. And I think the reason he said precisely nothing is because no one can actually say anything about this. And I also watch, other people talk about consciousness sometimes on YouTube, and invariably I end up with the same feeling. I want my money back, even though, well, I don't want my money back because I didn't pay anything, but I want my time back. I want that hour of my life back. So I have a very strong feeling here that this is just an impenetrable mystery, but it's kind of interesting to knock it around.
Yeah, I'm curious about where the research will go, if anywhere, like I am, but yeah. hypothetical right now. So
Right, that's great. Thank you, guys. Thanks very much.
I'll just throw in also, actually, I think it's kind of interesting how this has become almost like a new religious belief in terms of the strength of people's opinions about this. You know, I've heard some speakers on YouTube become almost incandescent with rage at the suggestion that everything is simply physical, and furious at the thought that consciousness is might not be supreme. So it's kind of interesting that, you know, well, just that this can give rise to very, very strong feelings, a little bit like religions can. Yeah. Should we go on?
yeah, well,
Well, let's try this one. It looks a bit abstract to me. Let's try it. Is the illusion of the self intrinsically linked with the body? When I inquire who hears this sound, the brain non-verbally tells me this body. So is the illusion of the self intrinsically linked with the body? You or me? Well, I've got an answer. I'll go through it quickly while you're thinking, if you like. Yeah, the illusion of the self is intrinsically linked with the body as long as there is a body. Yeah, I would say so. Except, yeah, the illusion of the self. Yeah, the illusion of the self is intrinsically linked with the body as long as there's a body. Part of the shock of realization that we've already talked about is that when the illusion of the self drops away, it's very common for the sense of the body also to disappear, as Dawn was talking about earlier. So that would be my answer to that. Do you want to come in?
It's because no one hears, but it's, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the mind, the identification falling away from mind and body both. I mean, like I say, it's a somatic experience as well as a you know, mentally that central core is just annihilated. So, you know, the question of who hears, who sees, there's just seeing, there's just hearing, which is kind of the same, only it's just appearing. So it's, yeah, there's no one to whom it's appearing. Yeah, but it's the same and not the same, because there's no one who's hearing that or seeing that or whatever. But yeah, there's nothing more to say really on that.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, no hands up. So the next question here. Oh, it's just a comment from Dimitri. Yes, the realization that non-duality is not about being a perfect person is such a relief recently. Yeah. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's kind of the end of perfection. You know, like this gives you the kind of ability just to be authentic. You know, which doesn't mean that you will be authentic, but certainly it's much easier if you realize that you're not being authentic, that you can just start to get in touch with your authentic self, and rather than going around being a people pleaser like I did, you can start to kind of just be how you are, which is sometimes great, sometimes in a good, you know, whatever, all of that's acceptable, all the different parts of you. Yeah, so that's, yeah, but that it's not a guarantee. This does not guarantee authenticity either, but it certainly makes it a damn sight easier to embody that, for sure.
Yes, a lot of very tasty and attractive and addictive spiritual stories can fall away. A lot of addictive spiritual stories, which often have quite near their core all sorts of assumptions about what about a perfected person, not just a perfect person, but we have to become perfected and what that looks like. It can be such a huge relief. you know, because these ideas of the perfected person are a straitjacket. It can be such a relief for all of that just to fall away. You know, this is freedom. I mean, the name of this show is The Wind of Freedom. In other words, it allows for everything, it embraces everything, and it does not say there is a certain way we have to be. So yeah, I very much relate to that.
Yeah, perfection is a real barrier to doing anything. In a way, it can make you procrastinate for the rest of your life. It's something you really need to get over. It's something you learn really young and to survive, basically. So it's about getting rid of that, getting rid of any ideals of how you should be, and just being that idiosyncratic person that you are. And that's beautiful. That's actually beautiful when you realize that can be totally accepted. And when it is, other people tend to like that as well. Everybody knows where they are with you. It's great. That's a real gift. So yeah.
Okay, next question. This is again one for you, Dawn. You talk about experience, Dawn. Is not the end of separation also the end of experience?
Well, experience is just what's happening. So and also because the character lives in time, and you know, is the timeless at the same time. So that's paradoxical, because I think I mentioned before, Tim Freak's very good on this. So, and like, you need time to understand a conversation. Experience, you know, happens. It's not like you're just you know, in the moment. Like, events happen, things happen. You can talk about that. You know, life goes on as before. It's just nobody living life. Life is just lived. Life is just happening. So yeah, it's you know, without experience, well, you know, this wouldn't there'd be nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's the mystery. There isn't nothing. There's this, all this appearing. So yeah. I don't know. No, I just add very simply, the end of separation, as long as the body mind's still alive, I'm assuming that, then the end of separation is the end of the experiencer. It's not the end of experience. You know, experience goes on. This voice keeps talking, this arm keeps moving, but it's the end of the one who feels themselves to be the experiencer. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I don't know whether I want to go near the next question. It's about vasectomy. Well, I can't duck out. It's up there, isn't it? Thinking about vasectomy, does this affect one's energies in a negative way? Well, I can answer that very simply. I have absolutely no idea. Do you want to add anything to that? No idea.
Should we move on?
Let's move.
I think we'll move on. Sorry, can't help you with that one. Oh, here's it's just a comment.
Poppy! Oh, I met this woman in the Chelsea Library. Oh, wow. Yes, it's funny. I went to a library a few years ago, and I was drawn to this woman, and we got talking, and turned out she was awake, and she's living in her own ship or boat, whatever. She's an amazing woman. Yeah, nice to hear. Yeah, I never forget that. So we chatted for quite a while, and then so yeah, nice to hear from you. Cool. Yeah, that was lovely. It's weird somehow. Like, I just had a natural feeling there's something about her. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, cool.
Okay, I think we've run out of questions here. No one's got their hand up.
There's one more there.
Oh yes, here we go. Oh, come on, that's not a fair question. I can't answer that one. Dawn, you can answer it. What is your favorite non-duality book?
Oh, wow, non-dual. God, these things change over time. So I would say Robert Saltzman's The 10,000 Things, maybe right now, because I think he's great. Yeah, I don't know. That's a one that springs to mind at the minute. I haven't had time to think about it, but like, yeah, I wasn't really into the Nisargadatta so much, or Raman Maharshi. Well, I just get quite I find that quite unexciting. Pretty like, what about you?
What about me? Well, I'm hard put to choose between Tony Parsons' The Open Secret and my very own I Hope You Die Soon. There you go.
Obviously, Richard's book.
That's why I didn't want to answer that question, because I'm so bashful. But yeah, I genuinely do like both those books. If I'm going to mention any others, I mean, I have to say I am not now, nor have I ever been, either a member of the Communist Party or a reader of non-duality books. I've been addicted to and fascinated by going to talks and so forth, but I did read a few early on. I also like Leo Hartung's Awakening to the Dream very much. And I like Nathan Gill's book, the name of which I have forgotten at the moment. Can you remember it?
I can't.
Not Clarity, there was another one. Whichever, I think he wrote two, whichever one wasn't Clarity, so yeah.
And Jiddu Krishnamurti is the first I read. And yeah, I did like him initially, and G. Krishnamurti as well. Yeah, just the life in him, like he just seems so alive. Yeah. So yeah, I really enjoy the idea of him, but also Jiddu, because he made me question myself for the first time. That was before I'd even heard of non-duality. It's like, wow, really opened my mind, that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I liked reading G. Krishnamurti's stuff as well. I think partly maybe because some of it seemed quite bonkers, but I did enjoy that. Yeah. Richard, Jonathan Richard is my favorite book as well. Jonathan Lowry also asked, this is for you because you mentioned him, is Robert Saltzman a non-duality author? I thought he was just, I like that phrase. I thought he was just an anti-spiritual warmonger. Well, I haven't read him, so,
I just love the way, I don't know, I just get a sense of real authenticity with him, and I don't know, a real just sensitivity and a question, I don't know, he's just he doesn't try to conform to anything, and I love that. There's a kind of real sense that he's just writing from what he really feels. There's no kind of trying to, I don't know, conform to non-duality, which I think there is a kind of sense of that some point. But yeah, he seems very clear to me. I don't know what to say.
I've never read anything by Robert Saltzman, but I like watching him. I think he's great. I have a vague feeling that some years ago we had some emailing correspondence, him and me, about, I think it actually revolved around these kind of spiritual ideas about celibacy and other forms of purity. And I really like that because I felt we were both very much on the same side there. But the trouble is I can't find that correspondence. I've been looking for it in my files and can't find it. So it's quite possible that it wasn't Robert Saltzman at all. So if it wasn't and he takes offense at that, then I apologize. But no, I enjoy watching him. And here's a question that needs to be tackled. Is there any practice you recommend?
Yeah, the practice of being yourself. Just be yourself. Forget about non-duality. No, don't forget about non-duality, because you'll not be able to. But yeah, just practice being yourself, and then not as a means to realization, but just, I think that's the biggest gift, because it's not guaranteed with awakening either. Just to really kind of tune into your emotions and to be really authentic to that. I think that's like, and to withdraw all your projections, because that's not guaranteed either. If you don't own this, if you really don't own your own awakening as well, there's no guarantee that you will totally trash your projections. So to be totally free from all authority, you've got to really come into your own power and just start to really think for yourself. And that's not necessarily easy. That can take time as well, but it's very well worth doing. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, is there any practice? I remember maybe sit on a bench in the park, look at a tree, have a cup of tea, maybe anything that might be relaxing. But what I really want to say is that, there's this terrible phrase that's just popped into my head that some people use, a practiceless practice. I don't really know what a practiceless practice is, but what I do know, and this is a complete mystery and I cannot explain it, is that for many people, a practice simply seizes them. And it seizes them, and the practice is going and sitting and listening to non-duality speakers live if you can, and reading books and watching speakers on YouTube. This is not actually a recommendation, it's just that I noticed that this is a practice that just seizes some people at certain times. And it's like, you know, in other words, there may come a time when we are dragged by the scruff of our neck to non-duality. So to me, that would be a real practiceless practice, because it's a practice that nobody's doing. You know, nobody can do that. Nobody can sit down and go, right, now I'm going to be seized by non-duality. But nevertheless, that can actually happen.
And there is an energy in those, like the meetings and being in nature as well, that creates a kind of openness that, you know, like, that can open you up to this. You can have the, you know, the self can drop away in that momentarily. So, and it's interesting as well, because even after awakening, there's certain scenarios. So just sitting, it's like oneness likes idleness or sloth, or you just sit or you just wait, or something, you really sink much more deeply into this. And I think that's why people experience a lot of the non-duality meetings and stuff as really opening them up, and they get a kind of taste of this. So I would follow your bliss, as you know, Joseph Campbell said. You know, it's like wherever you feel more relaxed, and it's good for you anyway. Just to be somewhere where you can drop all you're doing and just to be, you know.
Right, now we go to the metaphysical again. Is anything knowable is the next question.
You can.
Oh, thank you. No, there you go. No, of course not. I mean, there's just this. How could it be knowable? I mean, the mind thinks that lots of stuff's knowable, and there you go. We've got a career for life for the mind, you know, sorting out what's knowable and pinning it down, defining it, putting it in glass cases with pins through its heart, writing about it in books. That's the mind, of course. But no, essentially, in an absolute sense, of course, nothing is knowable. This is simply an appearance. So what is it? It's what it appears to be. What is its essence? Everything and nothing. Silence and movement. That's it. You know, so no things. And the question is, I'm being a bit picky here, because the question is, anything knowable? No, things are not knowable. No, we just make reasonable guesses at them and hope the guesses work out.
Yeah, and if you're really left hemisphere dominant, if you're a real kind of bureaucratic mind, the sort of left hemisphere of the brain is very knowledge-based, very I know everything. If you ever listen to Ian McGilchrist or whatever, like, you know, you need to be in being, you need to, I don't know what I was going to say. But yeah, so there, yeah, it's beyond the mind, this stuff. So it isn't, there's nothing that can be known. So yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing that can be known. That's a good one. Yeah. Next one, please. Did you hear a dialogue between Jim Newman and Robert Salzman? Yeah, I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It's
yeah.
very good.
Very good.
Entertaining.
Two apparent people coming from what seemed to me quite different, you know, quite different positions with some similarities. It was great. It was a good joust or judo match. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I watched, Jonathan Lowry says, I watched the Jim Newman and Robert Salzman conversation, and I thought that Jim Newman was quite clear and Robert did not make sense. He appeared inauthentic. I would be interested in an interview with you and Robert. Can Nothing Media make that happen? Well, are you up for that? The three of us, you, me and Robert Salzman? Do you reckon? Well, we'll just put that out there. We assume that Emerson is in the background here, reading and listening to that. And there's the question: can nothing media make that happen? It might not be as exciting though, because I think Jim Newman and Robert Saltzman both took up, very. I mean, this is my interpretation. Both took up very clear, but also very different positions. So there was a good old, ding dong going on, which I very much enjoyed. But I don't know whether that would be the same with us and Robert. Anyway, it's put out there now, isn't it? Yeah, should we leave it at that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we know Emerson's heard that.
I'm
Jim,
listening.
What? You're making notes?
Yes, I am.
Jim Newman speaks in a very authentic and a fluid way. That's why I like listening to him. It is as if butter is flowing in the pan. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Any more hands up out there?
There's a couple more here. Just a moment. Oh, that Robert Saltzman and Jim Newman. So,
Maybe wants a bit of gossip of what you think of non-duality speakers. Like,
learn how to sing in tune. Now, here's a question. Would you say learn how to sing in tune? It says, would you say that there can be bodily experiences separate from the brain or thought, like a natural reaction of sorts, devoid of meaning?
well, the body and mind isn't necessarily, I mean, after awakening without thought, everything is the same as, everything's known anyway, so you don't need thought for that. Everything devoid of meaning. I mean, that's what UG experienced, but everything is known without the mind anyway. So I'm not really sure what
it's getting at.
Yeah. So,
no.
Yeah, because thought can be entertaining, but it doesn't, it's not necessary to experience and to know what's going on, so which doesn't make sense unless you've experienced no mind, which, yeah.
Yes, if I think back to, when I was quite a long time ago, when I was a spiritual seeker and I had lots and lots of spiritual ideas and transpersonal ideas, we loved this phrase, the wisdom of the body. The body knows things that the mind does not know, which in a sense I would still, go with, that there's a kind of knowing which is deeper than the mind. But apart from that, I can't really address that question.
Yeah, because again, if you go by the brain, the right hemisphere is non-verbal, and that knowing is very deep, and it tends to be right. Like we know stuff without language. We do know, so it's connecting with your inner knowing is really, really important, and it's really essential to functioning well as well. So yeah.
Right. Anything else coming
questions?
Up? Anything else?
I think that's the rest of the questions there, Richard and Don. If you guys want to go to the hat, it's already 90 minutes. Time has gone really, really fast. And if you guys want to close this, that's completely okay. But you can also go to your hat. It's up to you.
Well, did I introduce the hat? I can't remember.
Not yet.
No, I think maybe we should keep the hat for another time in case it's needed. Yeah, there is this mysterious hat of questions. It's a kind of like a bottomless hat of questions that keeps on giving. But as we didn't need it today, I think we'll leave it till next month and see what happens then.